If you like the story, you can support the author on Patreon. Link is in the description.
Chapter 41, Stacking Passives. Regulus had a rather dangerous idea. A fatal strike against all carbon-based life, wizards included. What kind of compound was almost universally lethal to carbon-based organisms, and could be produced on the spot through transfiguration? Cyanide. Whether hydrogen cyanide gas or cyanide ions, both were extremely toxic. They rapidly inhibited cellular respiration, required only a tiny lethal dose, and took effect with terrifying speed. The air contained nitrogen and carbon. Water vapor provided hydrogen. In theory, if one's magical control were absurdly precise, it would be possible to instantly isolate nitrogen, carbon, and hydrogen atoms from the surrounding environment, forcibly assemble them into hydrogen cyanide molecules, and deliver them straight into a target's respiratory system. That demanded more than control over molecular arrangement. It bordered on the delusion of atomic-level manipulation, along with real-time elemental identification and synthesis path calculations on the level of a supercomputer. At present, it was pure fantasy. But the magical world never lacked miracles that turned the impossible into reality. At the very least, this line of thought pointed to the heights transfiguration might reach under extreme conditions. At that level, it would no longer be a support discipline in combat. It would become the most concealed and most lethal of weapons. If struck, a highly skilled wizard might have a chance at emergency self-rescue. A mediocre one would almost certainly die. Of course, that was unimaginably far away, perhaps even unattainable forever. Still, it was a direction worth moving toward. Hermes struggled to his feet, bracing himself against the bedpost, head lowered, no longer daring to look at Regulus. The arrogance in his heart had been completely shattered, replaced by deep wariness and fear, along with a trace of twisted curiosity toward that unknown power he did not even realize he felt. The confidence he once had in overturning the situation through dark magic now seemed laughable. He needed to reassess everything, himself included, and how he should face this terrifying roommate. Silence returned to the dormitory. A faint, unreadable smile touched Regulus's lips as he picked up a fresh piece of graphite and began another round of practice. Exploring the essence of matter through transfiguration was undeniably fascinating, but Regulus knew it required years of accumulation. It could not be rushed. Right now, he needed something more immediate and critical. Defensive capabilities to deal with the looming threat of Voldemort. Occlumency came first. The original records mentioned that Severus Snape had relied on this art to act as a spy at Voldemort's side without being discovered by a master of legilimency. True mastery of occlumency did more than defend against legilimency. It might even help resist the Imperious Curse. It was an indispensable survival skill when facing Voldemort. But occlumency alone was not enough. He began thinking about passive magic. Spells that required no active casting to remain effective, or that triggered automatically to protect the caster. Hogwarts's standard curriculum rarely covered these. They were often considered advanced or obscure arts, scattered among ancient family legacies or buried in high-level grimoires. Occlumency was the most fundamental of these passive mental defenses. For Regulus, entering the restricted section without permission was a matter of 0 times or countless times. Tonight, a Wednesday evening before Halloween, the castle was unusually quiet. He decided to sneak in again. The process was routine by now. He did not linger. His goals were clear. Using powerful mental scanning and reading techniques, he rapidly absorbed and memorized the core content of the relevant books. He saw many titles. The Fortress of the Mind, Essentials of Mental Defense. Ancient Warding Rituals and Permanent Magical Imprints. The Nature of Magic, on Shaping and Disguising Personal Magic. An Introduction to Dark Magic Detection and Countermeasures. Soul Resilience, on Resisting Possession and Enchantment. The Hidden Path, Tracking, Counter-Tracking, and Magical Obfuscation. The depth of Hogwarts's library was staggering. It also outlined a vast field of knowledge he would need to explore in the future. Back in the dormitory, Regulus immediately began practicing occlumency. According to the texts, its core lay in strictly controlling the leakage of thoughts and emotions, and constructing complex false structures or rigid mental labyrinths deep within the mind to mislead intruders. Training progressed through several stages. First came the basic barrier. Focus the mind and erect a simple wall at the outer edge of consciousness, preventing surface thoughts from scattering freely or being read. Next was organization and partitioning. Different memories, knowledge, and emotions were categorized and stored in separate mental rooms. Then came false thought generation. actively creating plausible but irrelevant or misleading mental fragments that would automatically be pushed forward as bait when an intrusion occurred. Finally, deep consolidation and automatic defense. Training the system into instinct, so that even without conscious maintenance, the subconscious would continue running basic barriers and bait deployment. Only the deepest and most central thoughts would be heavily protected, with access paths rendered extremely complex. With a mind and soul that had been relentlessly tempered through meditation, already far surpassing his peers and even many adult wizards, Regulus found entry-level occlumency almost frictionless. He quickly mastered the construction of basic barriers. His mental partitioning was orderly and precise. That said, reaching a level capable of fully deceiving a legilimency master like Voldemort would likely require far more practice and refinement of advanced techniques. Still, the door was now open. What remained was patience and adaptation. He even formed a hypothesis. Could the dynamic model of star meditation serve as a special core for a mental labyrinth? Hide the most critical secrets within constantly running, highly complex stellar calculations. Even if an intruder breached the outer defenses, faced with a vast, ever-moving starfield that demanded immense computational ability to comprehend, they would likely lose their bearings long before finding anything of value. Over the next 2 days, while solidifying his occlumency, he also began exploring other passive magic. He understood the prototype of constant protogo as shaping his own magic, spreading it across the surface of his body as an extremely thin but evenly distributed protective layer. This required continuous, subconscious micro-adjustments of magic and consumed tremendous focus. For now, it could only be maintained for short periods. Danger sense, combined with his already sharp magical perception, became another focus. He consciously trained himself to notice even the faintest hostility in his surroundings directed toward him. Every passive spell was difficult to learn and master. They did not pursue explosive power. Instead, they demanded exquisite control over one's magic and mind, along with long-term, gradual transformation. But their advantages were obvious. Once established, they became instinctive, always on armor and radar, offering early warnings before danger struck. They provided an automatic buffer when attacked, and protected the deepest secrets when someone attempted to pry. For someone who needed to maneuver within the dark faction, their importance rivaled that of any powerful offensive spell. Friday afternoon, potions class ended early. Regulus headed toward the library as usual, but in a secluded corridor connecting the dungeon classrooms to the main stairwell, he heard familiar jeers and laughter. James Potter, Sirius Black, Peter Pettigrew, and Remus Lupin, who looked like he was trying to intervene with little success. They had Severus Snape surrounded. Snape's robes had been splashed with some kind of sticky potion residue that continued to emit a foul smell. His hair was soaked, clinging to his face. His expression was dark enough to drip venom. His wand was clenched tightly in his hand, but facing 4 opponents, especially with James and Sirius flanking him on either side, he was clearly isolated. Well, look who it is. Our dear Snivellus conducting another one of his potion experiments. James jeered loudly. Planning a new stink attack this time. Let me go, Potter, Snape hissed, the words forced out through clenched teeth. Let you go? We're just kindly helping you clean that unidentified filth off your robes. It's really disgusting. Just like you. Sirius lounged against the wall, wearing that familiar grin filled with rebellion and prankish delight. Regulus stopped, not stepping forward right away. He simply watched in silence. Chapter 42, Snape, I want you working for me. The first to notice Regulus was Remus Lupin. Almost instantly, Lupin sensed something dangerous. He turned and spotted Regulus standing quietly at the far end of the corridor. His expression shifted, and he immediately jabbed James in the side with his elbow to stop the non-stop chatter. Regulus raised an eyebrow slightly. A beast's intuition? James followed Lupin's gaze. The grin froze on his face. By reflex, he tightened his grip on his wand, a flicker of alarm flashing through his eyes along with a forced show of hostility. Peter was even worse. He practically jumped behind Lupin, using him as a shield. Sirius looked over as well. When the 2 pairs of grey eyes met, the careless, mocking smile on Sirius's face slowly faded. The brothers stood a dozen feet apart, staring at each other in silence amid the corridor's lingering malice and laughter. Sirius's thoughts drifted. He remembered James storming off earlier, swearing to get even for him and teach Regulus a lesson, only to return later looking as if his soul had been wrung dry. He remembered Lupin's low, shaken description of that fight. He remembered their childhood too. A quiet little brother who always stayed close to their mother, yet somehow managed to do things Sirius had to struggle desperately to achieve. And since starting at Hogwarts, he kept seeing Regulus everywhere. In the library. In the corridors. On the way to class. Always alone, arms full of thick books, moving at a brisk pace. He seemed to be studying all the time. Or heading off to study. The thought surfaced without warning. It was nothing like his life, or James's. Quidditch, pranks, sneaking around the castle in search of secrets. A completely different world. He used to think Regulus's way of living was boring and rigid. Proof of being shackled by the family. But now, after what had happened to James, and with the pressure Regulus radiated just by standing there, Sirius found himself thinking differently. Had the gap between them really grown this wide without him noticing? Not just a suffocating difference in magical strength, but a gap in choices. In direction. In how much each of them had invested in their own path. Enjoyed the show enough? Sirius asked. His voice sounded rougher than usual, though it still carried that familiar, stubborn refusal to back down. He did not meet Regulus's eyes. Instead, his gaze slid to the stone wall beside them. Only then did Regulus start walking forward. He did not look at James. He did not look at Snape, or anyone else. He stopped between the two sides and fixed his eyes on Sirius. Picking on someone who's alone is how you prove your courage and find your fun. Regulus's voice was calm. If that's the case, then Gryffindor bravery is cheaper than I thought. James wanted to snap back, but the memory of the last lesson, and Regulus's warning, made the words stick in his throat. Not yet, he thought. I'm not ready yet. Regulus kept his gaze on Sirius, his tone flat and restrained. Wasting your time and energy on this does you no good. This world won't leave much room for jokes and games for very long. If you don't want to wake up one day unable to even protect yourself, or the people you care about, then you should start thinking seriously now about what you want to use your magic for. And how to make it truly useful. Sirius did not hear condescension in Regulus's words. It sounded more like a reminder grounded in fact. There was even something complicated beneath it that he could not quite name. A warning given because of blood. Sirius's heart clenched. He wanted to shout back. To say he did not need lectures from a Slytherin, from this traitor of a brother. To say he lived free and happy, and that he would protect the people who mattered to him in his own way. But the things Regulus mentioned crashed into his overheated mind like chunks of ice, cutting through rebellion and loyalty alike. He thought of the tension at home, growing heavier by the day. Of the vague hints in his parents' letters. Of Bellatrix, slipping further and further into madness. Maybe Regulus was right. That thought only made him more irritated, more defiant. My business is none of yours, Sirius shot back stiffly. Then he turned to James and the others. Let's go. This is pointless. James looked like he wanted to argue, but Lupin gently tugged his sleeve. They followed Sirius, hurrying out of the corridor. Their retreat looked rushed. Once the marauders were gone, only Regulus and a thoroughly bedraggled Snape remained. Snape quickly cast a cleaning charm to remove the filth from his robes. He pushed his damp hair back into some semblance of order, his expression still dark. When he looked at Regulus, his eyes were full of wariness and suspicion, along with a trace of humiliation at being seen like this. I don't need your help, Black, Snape rasped, his voice thick with resistance. I don't need handouts from some pure-blood heir. Regulus was not surprised by the reaction. Severus Snape was brilliant. His talent for potions and dark magic was extraordinary, but he was also painfully sensitive and deeply insecure, his pride and resentment twisted by his background and experiences. He craved power. He craved recognition. He wanted desperately to be accepted by the pure-blood circle, yet instinctively distrusted and guarded himself against anyone from its core. In Regulus's eyes, Snape was a highly valuable potential collaborator. One could even call him a prime asset. A future potions master. Profound understanding of dark magic. Careful, patient, and capable of enduring in silence. Handled correctly, his value far exceeded even Cuthbert's or Hermes's. Handouts. Regulus repeated, his tone unchanged. Do you think I stood here to enjoy your embarrassment, or to savor the feeling of saving you? Snape pressed his lips together. He said nothing, but his eyes made his answer clear. You're wrong, Regulus said. I happened to be passing by, and they were in my way. As for you," he looked Snape up and down. "Your talent in potions is something even Professor Slughorn praises openly. And your understanding of defense against the dark arts, or rather, of certain specialized branches of magic, already surpasses that of your peers. What you possess is worth far more than the bloodlines some people love to boast about." Snape's body tensed. Regulus's words struck directly at the most conflicted part of his heart. He despised pure-blood arrogance, yet yearned for his abilities to be acknowledged by that very circle. "But," Regulus continued, changing direction, "if you keep wasting your energy on childish clashes with Potter and the rest, or remain satisfied with nothing beyond school textbooks, you'll never stop being on the receiving end. Your talent will rot unused. Real power cannot be gained from the public shelves of the Hogwarts library, nor from piecing together scattered dark magic notes on your own." Shock flickered through Snape's eyes, followed by even deeper suspicion. "What are you saying?" "It's simple." Regulus stepped closer, lowering his voice so only the two of them could hear. "Accepting help isn't shameful, Snape. No one can rely on themselves alone, especially when you're trying to obtain knowledge and power that certain people keep tightly controlled. I can offer access. Opportunities to read books you might never touch otherwise. Or limited exchanges in certain fields. In return, I may need your insights in potions, or in some less conventional areas of magical research." The terms Regulus offered were vague, but dangerously tempting. "You can take your time," Regulus said. He did not elaborate further. He turned and left. He knew that pushing someone as proud and suspicious as Snape too hard would only backfire. Regulus disappeared around the corner, leaving Snape standing alone in the corridor, his thoughts in turmoil. Regulus Black's words echoed in his mind like a curse. The humiliation was still there, but the impact of what had been said was stronger. Black had seen his talent. He might even know about the dark magic Snape was studying in secret. The opportunity he offered, was it real, or a trap? Was he trying to recruit him? Or simply exploit his skill in potions? Yet one thing was undeniable. Black was right. What had tangling with Potter and the others ever brought him, aside from wasted time and humiliation? What the school taught was nowhere near enough. Not enough to gain real power. Not enough to escape his current situation. Not enough to be worthy of Lily. Chapter 43, A Small Favor. By Halloween evening, Hogwarts had completely transformed. Hundreds of living bats drifted through the corridors, clinging upside down to candle holders and suits of armor. Every so often, wings fluttered, releasing soft, papery sounds. The walls were lined with grinning jack-o'-lanterns, magical flames dancing inside them and casting all sorts of strange, comical shadows. The air was thick with the sweet scent of baked pumpkin pie, mixed with a restless magic that belonged only to festivals. The younger students were buzzing with excitement, gathering in small groups to talk about the feast to come and speculate about what bizarre desserts Dumbledore might conjure up this year. Laughter echoed through the corridors. Regulus was among them. Tonight, he had no intention of burying himself in the library or slipping off to some secluded corner to practice magic. Instead, he strolled unhurriedly through the main castle, taking in the dense holiday atmosphere. When he reached a third-floor corridor hung with enchanted tapestries that shifted and changed their patterns, a bright voice called out to him. "Hey! Black! Over here!" It was Eleanor Bones. She looked troubled, clearly stuck on how to decorate one corner near the entrance to the Hufflepuff common room. When she spotted Regulus, her eyes lit up and she waved him over without hesitation. Behind Regulus were Cuthbert, Hermes, and Alex. They had been moving together more and more often lately, forming a small but noticeable Slytherin group. Cuthbert followed with deliberate pride, shoulders straight, as if announcing his allegiance to the world. Alex walked a step behind and to the side. He knew that staying close to Regulus meant fewer people picking on him, and perhaps even a hint of respect. It was survival instinct, plain and simple. Hermes brought up the rear. His expression was still dark, his gaze frequently settling on Regulus's back. It was less following and more close observation, as though he were constantly searching for any flaw or weakness. Hearing Eleanor call out, Regulus stopped. Cuthbert immediately tugged Alex back before he could wander closer, then shot Hermes a look. The three of them stepped aside in silent agreement, pretending to examine a nearby tapestry depicting an animated duel between knights. Regulus walked over to Eleanor alone. Standing beside her was another Hufflepuff girl with short brown hair. When she saw Regulus approaching, she instinctively drew her shoulders in, curiosity flickering through her eyes along with a trace of nerves. The name Regulus Black had been spreading fast among the lower years lately. Pureblood and even overpowering fifth years. Favored by almost every professor. All of it wrapped him in an aura that made people instinctively wary. But with Eleanor at her side, the girl straightened a little, though her fingers still twisted nervously at the edge of her robe. "Bones," Regulus said as he came closer, giving her a polite nod. Then he turned to the girl beside her and inclined his head as well. "And you are?" His manner was calm and even, without the slightest hint of disdain or arrogance, regardless of her background. That alone made her pause. "Oh, this is Susan Payne, my friend," Eleanor said cheerfully. "Susan, this is Regulus Black. I told you about him. The Slytherin who's really sharp in herbology." Hello, Mr. Black," Susan said softly. "Hello, Miss Payne," Regulus replied, his tone unchanged. He genuinely did not care about blood status. The Black bloodline was already pure enough. He had no need to cling to superiority, much less belittle others to prove it. "Having trouble?" Regulus asked, glancing at the pumpkins and scattered materials on the floor. "Yet. We wanted to do something special here. Just lining up jack-o'-lanterns feels kind of boring." Eleanor pointed to a recessed alcove beside the Hufflepuff common room entrance. "Professor Sprout said we could be creative as long as it wasn't too scary. Hufflepuff's symbol is the badger, so I was thinking about combining pumpkins with badgers, but we obviously can't hang an actual animal specimen here." She scratched her head, clearly stuck on how to make the idea work. Susan nodded beside her. "We tried transfiguration, but either it doesn't look right, or it reverts after a while." Regulus studied the alcove, then the pumpkins of various sizes on the floor, thinking for a moment. "If you lean into the badger's traits and keep the Halloween feel, it might work," he said. He crouched and picked up one of the already hollowed, carved pumpkins. Eleanor and Susan leaned in, watching closely. Badgers are known for being brave, even reckless. "They don't scare easily," Regulus said, examining the pumpkin as he spoke. He drew his wand and tapped the jack-o'-lantern lightly. Magic flowed. The pumpkin's shape began to change. Two short protrusions formed at the top, resembling rounded badger ears. The comical carved face on the front grew bolder, the lines rougher. The wide grin gained a fierce, fearless edge. At the eyes, magic traced two small, sharp points of white light, like a badger's eyes gleaming in the dark. Regulus tapped the wand again. The steady magical flame inside shifted from warm orange to a cooler, silvery white. The flame's rhythm became stronger, more irregular. Beneath the lantern, faint shadowy marks appeared, like the traces of clawed scratches. A unique decoration was born, blending Hufflepuff's symbol with Halloween flair. It looked cool and playful at the same time, carrying that unmistakable, stubborn badger spirit. "Wow!" Eleanor exclaimed. "This is perfect. Exactly what I wanted. It's cool and it fits so well." Susan stared wide-eyed, her earlier nerves forgotten. "That's amazing." Even the flame changed color. "Glad I could help," Regulus said calmly. He flicked his wand again and again, repeating the process on the other prepared pumpkins. Soon, 5 or 6 jack-o'-lanterns stood before the alcove, each with a slightly different expression, all unmistakably badger-like. Silvery flames danced inside them, lighting the area with a lively, mysterious glow. "What are you all working on here?" a gentle voice asked. Professor Sprout approached, looking as though she had just come from the greenhouses. She carried a small pot of softly glowing mushrooms. "Professor, look! Regulus helped us make badger pumpkins," Eleanor said excitedly. Professor Sprout stepped closer, clearly intrigued as she examined the lanterns. Then she looked at Regulus standing quietly nearby and smiled in approval. "Very creative, Mr. Black. The transfiguration is stable, the intent is clear, and it balances the festive mood with house identity nicely. 5 points for your ingenuity." "Thank you, Professor." "It was nothing," Regulus said, dipping his head slightly. After a brief exchange about flame stability, Regulus excused himself and left. Watching his retreating figure, Susan finally murmured to Eleanor, "He's not really like the rumors, is he? His magic is incredible. That transfiguration alone feels like something a lot of third years in our house couldn't manage. And he's polite too. Not like some Slytherins." Eleanor smiled as she looked at the badger pumpkins. "Of course he's different. I told you before. He thinks differently from most people. As for his magic. She lowered her voice. Some of the things I've heard might be even more impressive than what he shows. Elsewhere, Regulus and his dorm mates returned to the Slytherin common room. Halloween decorations were underway here as well, but the style was entirely different. Upper years took charge, using magic to make silver-green silks slither along the walls like living snakes. Conjured bats gleamed with a metallic sheen. Jack-o'-lanterns were carved into the heads of beasts and venomous serpents, their interiors burning with eerie green flames. The entire common room radiated a sense of cold elegance. Most of the younger students lingered at the edges, handing over materials, running errands, or watching the older students work with open admiration as more complex magic unfolded. Regulus observed quietly, understanding settling in. Hufflepuff favored warmth and inclusiveness, with a touch of grounded creativity. Slytherin prized refinement and separation, its displays heavy with symbolism and competition. Neither was better or worse. They were simply reflections of different house cultures and values. Chapter 44, The Bloody Baron. The Halloween feast arrived right on schedule. Dark clouds rolled across the enchanted ceiling of the Great Hall, thunder flashing and lightning splitting the sky, yet none of it disturbed the celebration below. The long tables were piled high with food. Sausages leapt into waiting plates on their own, purple drinks bubbled cheerfully, and desserts shaped like all manner of horrors somehow tasted wonderful. Regulus sat midway down the Slytherin table, eating in silence. Cuthbert was beside him. Alex sat a little farther away. Hermes sat across from them, alone, methodically cutting his steak without a word. The mood was calm enough, until a second-year Slytherin swayed over with a goblet in hand. Robustan Lestrange. Rodolphus Lestrange's younger brother. Bellatrix's brother-in-law. The Lestrange family had long been one of Voldemort's most fanatical inner supporters. That fact was barely a secret anymore. Robustan clearly took pride in it. His face always carried a blend of zeal and arrogance. He had obviously drunk more than his share of pumpkin juice, perhaps with something mixed in. His cheeks were flushed as he came to a stop near Regulus's table. "Well, look at that. Our first-year chief," Robustan said, his voice sharp enough to grate. He deliberately adopted a familiar yet condescending tone. "Happy Halloween, Black. Bella mentioned you in her last letter. Said you've been doing well, not embarrassing the family. My brother Rodolphus says that maybe someday, there'll be a chance for us to work together, in service of a greater cause." Cuthbert frowned at once and set his cutlery down. Alex lowered his head, shoulders tight with nerves. Hermes paused as well, his gloomy gaze sliding toward Robustan. Regulus lifted his eyes and gave Robustan a brief look. He said nothing. He simply picked up his napkin and wiped the corner of his mouth. That single glance was enough. Cuthbert understood immediately. "Lestrange, this is a dinner table," Cuthbert said coolly, his voice steadier than usual. "Family letters and private matters are better discussed somewhere else." Robustan clearly had not expected a response from Cuthbert of all people. He froze, then scowled. "I'm talking to Black, Avery." "Black is eating," Hermes said instead, his voice low and rough, edged with his usual chill. "And that great cause you're so eager to show off. A lot of people here wouldn't understand it. Bragging too early tends to bite back." That landed like a blade. Robustan's face darkened. Two of his dorm mates stood nearby, both purebloods, though their families carried less weight than the Lestranges. One looked like he wanted to smooth things over. The other watched with detached interest. The air grew awkward. "Come on, Robustan. It's a feast." Robustan glanced at Regulus, who had already gone back to eating without a shred of reaction. He looked again at Cuthbert's hard stare and at Hermes's cold, unblinking gaze. He knew he would gain nothing here. Worse, he might humiliate himself. With a sharp huff, he turned and stalked away. Regulus never looked at him again, as though the interruption had been nothing more than a buzzing insect passing by. As he cut his food, his thoughts moved quickly. The Lestrange brothers, Rodolphus in particular, were Voldemort's most devoted followers. Bellatrix's future husband. Fanatical executioners in the making. Robustan, shaped deeply by his family, had passion to spare but little judgment, his reckless and impulsive nature making him the perfect expendable enforcer. Someone like that could be useful in very specific situations. Like dangerous tasks or operations meant to draw attention. After that, fate would take its course. For those destined to fall into the abyss and drag others with them, Regulus felt no unnecessary sympathy. The feast rolled on. Laughter filled the great hall. Platters overflowed. Baked pumpkin pie scented the air. Sugared spiders crawled across plates. Dumbledore rose from his seat. He wore deep purple robes embroidered with silver stars, and behind his half-moon spectacles his eyes shone warmly. "Happy Halloween, everyone," he said, his voice clearly amplified by magic. "Tonight, we've invited a special group to entertain us." He clapped his hands lightly. Doors along one side of the hall swung open. 3 witches and wizards in bright costumes entered, followed by several small, well-trained magical creatures. At the front was a short, round witch. She bowed to Dumbledore, then turned to the students with a broad smile. "They'll be showing us a few magical tricks." The performance began. First came a dance of color-changing lizards. At the wave of a wand, the small creatures shifted from emerald green to gold, then to silver, arranging themselves into the shape of a Halloween pumpkin atop the tables. Gasps and applause rippled through the hall. Regulus watched quietly from the Slytherin table. His gaze drifted across the crowd, catching sight of the Bloody Baron gliding past the Ravenclaw table. Dark stains marked the ghost's robes, blotches that would never wash away. Regulus recalled passages from a brief history of soul magic. Ghosts were remnants of obsession, lingering forms of the soul. And a ghost like the Bloody Baron, who had existed for nearly 1,000 years, must carry an obsession beyond imagining. Like the Grey Lady of Ravenclaw, he was among Hogwarts's oldest spirits. Powerful in life, burdened with countless secrets in death. The performance reached its peak as the circus wizards conjured glowing magical butterflies. The butterflies formed the words "Happy Halloween" in the air, then dissolved into drifting golden dust. While attention was fixed on the spectacle, Regulus rose from his seat. He found the Bloody Baron in a shadowed corner, gazing toward the Ravenclaw table. The Baron's eyes passed through the noise and color, fixing on the Grey Lady's wavering figure. His expression was impossible to read. "Baron," Regulus said, stopping at a respectful distance. The ghost turned slowly. "A child of the Black family," the Baron said. His voice was dry and hollow. Regulus felt a stir of surprise. The Baron knew him, or at least recognized his bloodline. That was fine. Familiarity made questions easier. "I've read some records in my family's collection," Regulus said, getting straight to the point before a refusal could come. "There are things I wanted to ask you. They say ghosts are formed from obsession. From memories and emotions that refuse to fade. But why do some witches and wizards become ghosts while others do not? It doesn't seem like a choice." The Baron's lips twitched. It might have been a smile, or it might have been pain. "A choice." His tone carried a bitter mockery. "You think becoming a ghost is a choice? No, child. It is failure. Failure." Regulus pressed, encouraged by the ghost's willingness to speak. "An inability to let go," the Baron said, his gaze drifting back to the Grey Lady. "An inability to finish something. To accept it. Or to face certain truths. So we remain, trapped between life and death." Regulus recalled the book's discussion of soul integrity. A whole, healthy soul should pass on to the next stage, whatever that stage might be. No living person knew. A ghost, in that sense, truly was a failed state of the soul. "Then what is the difference," Regulus asked, "between a ghost's soul and a living one, aside from the lack of a body?" The Bloody Baron turned fully toward him. For the first time, something stirred within those empty eyes. "You are direct," the Baron said slowly, his voice like leaves scraping stone. "Unlike other students. They either fear me or pretend I do not exist. A living soul is whole and moving. It changes. A ghost's soul is frozen. Like an insect trapped in amber, it remains locked in the moment of death, unable to become anything else." Regulus caught the implication at once. So a ghost's strength comes from that frozen state. From the nature of that fixation itself. The Baron was silent for a long time. "Yes. Frozen means stable. Difficult to destroy. A living soul can be wounded, broken, and torn apart. A ghost's soul has already shattered once, shattered just enough. It did not disperse completely, but it lost the ability to change. Because of that, it is very hard to harm again." The words sent a tremor through Regulus's thoughts. A soul being torn apart. That was the essence of creating a Horcrux. Voldemort had split his soul into fragments and sealed them in vessels. In a sense, did that place him closer to a ghost than to a living person? Both were unnatural states of the soul. Choosing his words carefully, Regulus offered part of the truth. I've read books about the soul. About how it can be torn, and how those pieces can be preserved. Then he asked, if someone's soul has already been damaged, how can the remaining part be protected from further harm? Chapter 45, Snape draws closer. The Bloody Baron looked at Regulus with an unreadable expression. In that instant, Regulus felt as though many things had been seen through. A complete soul is the best defense. Just when Regulus thought there would be no answer, for reasons unknown even to himself, the Baron finally spoke. But if you're asking about a soul that's already been damaged, then fixation may be one way. A deliberate act of stabilization. Locking the injured portion in place so it stops fracturing further, like setting a broken bone with a splint. How? Regulus pressed. This was the crux of it. One question could yield two answers. Knowing how to protect also meant knowing how to destroy. The Baron shook his head. I don't know. I'm a failed example, not a successful one. But if you truly want to explore the secrets of the soul. He paused, as if weighing something. After a long while, he continued. Hogwarts hides a place. There are clues left behind by Rowena Ravenclaw herself. About wisdom. About the soul. About the possibility of transcending life and death. The room of requirement? The come and go room? Regulus asked. That was the place most closely tied to Ravenclaw in his memory. The Baron did not answer directly. He spoke on as if to himself. When you are truly ready, the castle will open a path for you. But for now, you are too young. Knowing too much is dangerous. With that, the Bloody Baron dissolved completely into the shadows, leaving only his final whisper hanging in the air. Be careful of your thirst for knowledge, child of the Black family. It will lead you to places you do not expect, and into dangers you did not foresee. Regulus stood there for a long time before turning away. By the time he returned to the Slytherin table, the performance had ended and the feast had shifted into free mingling. He had just sat down when several upper-year students approached. The first to speak was Evan Rosier, a 7th year, and Alex's distant cousin. Holding a goblet, he wore a polite smile. Regulus, happy Halloween. Alex mentions you often. You've got quite a presence among the lower years. I'm only doing what needs to be done, Regulus replied, keeping to proper social courtesy. A 6th-year boy beside Rosier let out a soft laugh. Regulus remembered his name. Wilkes. Schoolyard scuffles are nothing. The real magical world is outside, and out there, no one cares how well you perform at school. Wilkes's tone carried open disdain. With several members of his family already holding posts in the Ministry of Magic, he clearly viewed school achievements as meaningless. There was no reason to waste words on someone like that. Regulus ignored him. The third to step forward was a 7th-year girl, Alecto Caro. She was far more direct. My brother Amicus admires how you handled Traverse. He said that when you go to intern at the ministry, he can introduce you to some like-minded people. Regulus understood her meaning at once. The Caro siblings were openly aligned with Voldemort. Thank you, he replied evenly. I look forward to that day. Alecto raised an eyebrow, said nothing more, and turned away. Wilkes followed her, clearly losing interest. Regulus glanced toward the Gryffindor table. Sirius was staring back at him, his expression sour. James leaned in close, muttering something into Sirius's ear while pointing repeatedly toward the Slytherin table. Lily sat not far from them. She had noticed the upper-year Slytherins speaking with Regulus as well. She lowered her gaze to her plate, brow furrowed. The last time she had spoken with Regulus, he had already mentioned the situation beyond Hogwarts. Lily knew what that implied. See. James's voice carried over, deliberately loud. Those Death Eater wannabes are already trying to recruit him. I'd say he won't even need to graduate before joining them. Potter. Lily snapped, lifting her head sharply. What? I'm stating facts. James shot back, chin raised as he argued with her. Look at him. A textbook Slytherin. Everyone around him, their families are practically all on that side. You really think he won't be? Lily bit her lip. She wanted to argue, but the words would not come. She knew too well how much bloodlines could decide. The Black family already had one Sirius openly opposing them. What about Regulus? What choice would he make? At the far end of the Slytherin table, Robustan Lestrange was watching Regulus. His gaze was dark and sharp, fingers tapping against the tabletop in a steady rhythm. From a corner seat, Snape noticed Robustan's stare. His black eyes narrowed slightly. After the feast, the Slytherins returned to the dungeons in small groups. Regulus walked with Cuthbert and Hermes. Alex trailed a few steps behind, wanting to draw closer but hesitating. "That look Lestrange gave you," Hermes sneered. "Who does he think he is? He can't even manage a nonverbal spell. All he has is his family name." Cuthbert nodded. "He needs a lesson. Someone should remind him who actually gets to speak in Slytherin." Both of them looked to Regulus, waiting. Regulus was still thinking about what the Baron had said about transcending life and death. Hearing them, he gave a slight nod. "Don't make it too loud. Don't leave evidence." That was permission enough. Cuthbert and Hermes exchanged a glance, then smiled in silent understanding. Alex hurried forward, hesitating as he spoke. I can help too." No one responded. Cuthbert glanced back at him once, then turned away. Hermes did not even look at him. Back in the dormitory, Cuthbert and Hermes whispered at the far end of the room, discussing how to deal with Robustan. Their plans grew more detailed, more vicious by the minute. Regulus listened without comment. To him, these schoolyard conflicts were laughably childish. If he truly wanted someone gone, there were countless ways. Potion accidents, dark magic, curses, and even arranging an accident beyond school grounds. But at this stage, he needed followers like Cuthbert and Hermes. Facing a shared enemy was the fastest way to build cohesion. So he allowed it. Robustan Lestrange was a minor piece. The real concern lay outside. Voldemort's influence was spreading. His father Orion's letters hinted that many within the ministry had already pledged themselves in secret. His mother Walburga's letters urged him to associate more with suitable people. That meant pure-blood heirs, preferably those likely to become Death Eaters. Meditation could not stop. Not for a moment. The next morning's charms class brought a new spell. Professor Flitwick announced it with enthusiasm. "Today we'll be learning the softening charm. The incantation is Spungify." Standing atop a stack of books so the whole class could see him, he demonstrated the wand movement. Small clockwise circles, then a gentle flick. Like this. He cast the spell, and a corner of the platform immediately softened, springy like a sponge. Several students gasped. "This charm temporarily softens hard objects," Flitwick said as he hopped down and began patrolling the classroom. "It's often used to make temporary cushions, absorb falls, or set a few harmless traps." Slytherin and Ravenclaw shared the class. Regulus noticed a Ravenclaw girl with curly brown hair who stood out. She succeeded on her first attempt, earning 5 points from Flitwick. Regulus lifted his wand. Spungify. The stone block on his desk instantly turned a deep grey, sponge-like mass. When he pressed it, it sank easily, then slowly rebounded once he released it. The effect was even more refined than the Ravenclaw girls. After class, Regulus headed toward the library. Cuthbert and Hermes exchanged a glance and split up. Alex hesitated. He looked at Regulus, and when Regulus gave no instructions, he quickened his pace and followed Cuthbert. Near the library entrance, Regulus ran into Snape. "Black," Snape said flatly. "Snape," Regulus replied, even flatter. After a brief silence, Snape spoke again. "At the feast last night, Lestrange kept watching you. Not in a friendly way." Regulus raised an eyebrow slightly. Snape was offering him information of his own accord. It was a small thing, almost insignificant, but it was a good start. "He wasn't only watching me," Regulus said calmly. "He watches anyone who might make the Lestrange name look less important. Lestrange is like a dog guarding its food. Loud barking, bared teeth before the bite. With someone like Snape, overly refined language only widened the distance." Regulus made his words plainer. Snape's dark eyes flickered in the dim light. Regulus softened his tone just a little. "Still, thanks. I'm not worried about him, but it's always useful to know who's paying attention." He had no intention of sending Snape to the front lines. That would be a waste. Beyond his exceptional talent in potions, Snape's ability to observe and remain unseen was extraordinary. He was, without exaggeration, the finest sleeper agent the magical world could ever produce. Chapter 46, House Clash. December at Hogwarts was bitterly cold. Yet the stands along the Quidditch pitch were hot enough to make people sweat. Half an hour before the match, Regulus sat in the prime Slytherin viewing section, already calculating how he might make up for the time he was about to waste. Quidditch was the wizarding world's most popular sport. 12 people on broomsticks chasing a handful of balls. Matches could drag on for hours, sometimes even days. Regulus knew the rules. He also considered it an inefficient form of entertainment. The time cost was high, the tactical depth limited, and the risks far from trivial. Broken necks were hardly rare in Quidditch history. He had not planned on coming at all. Cuthbert had started pestering him early that morning. "You have to go. This is about house honor." Alex nodded along beside him. Hermes said nothing, but his silence carried the same agreement. For the sake of fitting in. Regulus sighed inwardly. In Slytherin, some occasions could not be skipped. So here he was, wrapped in a thick cloak. "It's starting!" Cuthbert suddenly shouted. Regulus looked up. At the center of the pitch, Madame Hooch blew her whistle, and the quaffle shot into the air. Slytherin's captain was a fifth-year named Elliot Rosier. He was a distant relative of Alex's family, but from the main branch. He came from the same house as Evan Rosier, the one who had approached Regulus at the Halloween feast. The man was built like a wall. Broad shoulders, tall frame, the sort who looked like he could block a doorway just by standing in it. During the pre-match huddle, he addressed the team loudly, right in front of everyone. "Listen up. Today, there's only one goal. We win. Victory matters more than style. I want to see Slytherin score higher than theirs on the board. I don't care how you do it." The words were brutally straightforward. A few chasers grinned. One of the beaters weighed his bat in his hand, testing the balance. Regulus turned his gaze to the opposite stands. Gryffindor's side was a sea of red. James Potter stood at the very front. As Seeker, he wore scarlet and gold robes. His hair was a mess, as always, but his eyes were bright with anticipation. From the stands, Sirius's voice rang out the loudest. "Gryffindor! Victory! James, tear those snakes apart!" His shout carried across half the pitch. Several younger Slytherins glared back and yelled in response, throats strained. The older students did not even bother to look his way. Sirius was practically hanging over the railing, arms flailing like he was about to take off. Peter Pettigrew huddled behind him, shouting too, though much more softly. Remus Lupin stood a little farther back. He wore a smile, but did not raise his voice. The professors sat on the central viewing platform. Dumbledore occupied the middle seat, eyes calm behind his half-moon spectacles as he watched the pitch. Professor McGonagall sat close beside him. Having taught Gryffindor for many years, she never missed a house match. A seasoned Quidditch fan. On the other side, Slughorn was chatting animatedly with Professor Flitwick, his plump fingers gesturing through the air. Professor Sprout had brought a bag of sweets and was handing them out to the younger students nearby. Professor Binns was absent. Ghosts, apparently, had little interest in Quidditch. Regulus swept his gaze across the field, already reading Slytherin's strategy. It was obvious enough. Use fouls to slow the pace, wait for Gryffindor to make mistakes. It could win games. It also bred grudges. The whistle blew again. The match began. Dash. The first 20 minutes were relatively normal. The quaffle zipped back and forth through the air. Blood jares boomed as beaters sent them flying. Slytherin scored first, 10 points, and Gryffindor equalized almost immediately. Then the small tricks started. The first was simple. As a Slytherin chaser passed the quaffle, his elbow accidentally slammed into a Gryffindor chaser's ribs. The boy let out a grunt, and the ball slipped free. Madame Hooch blew her whistle. "A warning! Dirty!" Someone shouted from the opposite stands. Cuthbert snorted. "The rules don't say you can't make contact." The second was subtler. Another Slytherin chaser accelerated, and the hem of his robe suddenly flicked outward, catching the tail of a Gryffindor player's broom. Half a second. That was all it took to steal the ball. Madame Hooch blew her whistle again. Another warning. Then came the third. And the fourth. James Potter made a sharp turn in midair, chasing the golden snitch as it flashed near the far end of the pitch. At that exact moment, a Slytherin beater sent a bludger straight into his projected path. James yanked his broom upward. The bludger skimmed past the sole of his shoe. Foul! Professor McGonagall was on her feet. Madame Hooch flew straight up to the beater, speaking sharply. She did not eject him, only awarded Gryffindor a penalty shot. The score kept stretching. 40 points. 50. Slytherin's tricks continued, growing more concealed, more malicious. By the time the score gap reached 150 points, the golden snitch appeared again. James Potter took off almost instantly. He rode the latest Nimbus 1001, and its speed showed. He streaked forward like a bolt of red lightning. Slytherin's seeker chased hard, but he was clearly a step behind. At the same time, the quaffle landed in a Slytherin chaser's hands. Gryffindor's goal hoops were right ahead, but the keeper had already read the play and sealed the angles. Under normal circumstances, the shot would never go in. That was when the Slytherin beater made another small move. He redirected the bludger toward the Gryffindor keeper's broom handle. The keeper dodged instinctively. His balance shifted for a fraction of a second. In that instant, the Slytherin chaser threw. The quaffle traced a vicious curve, slipping under the keeper's arm and straight through the rightmost hoop. The whistle blew. Goal confirmed. Almost simultaneously, James Potter closed his fingers around the golden snitch, its golden wings fluttering between his knuckles. It did not matter. Slytherin's last 10 points, added to their existing lead, put them ahead by 10 overall. The match was over. For 1 second, the pitch fell silent. Then it exploded. The Gryffindor players did not even land. Still mounted on their brooms, they swarmed Madame Hooch. James Potter was at the front, the golden snitch clenched in his fist. That was a foul. He hit my broom. The Gryffindor keeper shouted. Madame Hooch tried to explain. No one listened. James shoved the snitch into a teammate's hands, spun his broom, and dove toward the ground. He jumped off before he even touched down. Rosier. He charged straight at the Slytherin captain. Elliot Rosier had just dismounted. Seeing James coming, he bared his teeth in a grin. What, can't take a loss? You used dirty tricks. The ref called it valid. Rosier shrugged. If you've got a problem, take it up with Madame Hooch. It was like pouring oil onto a fire. Sirius vaulted down from the stands. Remus, Peter, and several other Gryffindor boys followed in a rush. It looked less like an argument and more like the start of a brawl. This is going to blow up, Cuthbert said, standing. Alex's face had gone pale. Hermes still said nothing, but his hand slid into the inner pocket of his robes. Regulus rose to his feet, eyes sweeping the field. On the professor's platform, Dumbledore remained seated. Professor McGonagall was already moving, Slughorn rising to follow. But it would take time for the professors to reach them. The two groups in front of him might start fighting within 30 seconds. Move, Regulus said simply. He headed down. Cuthbert and the others followed. More Slytherin students surged after them, a tide of green pouring from the stands. By the time they reached the main corridor outside the changing rooms, both sides had filled it. Green to the left. Red to the right. Between them, a narrow passage less than 10 feet wide. The older students stood at the front. On Slytherin's side, the 7th-year prefect Lucretius Burke stood squarely at the center. Narcissa was slightly behind him, poised and composed. Her fingers were already curled around her wand. Behind them were several 6th-year corps members, all surnames with real weight among pure-blood circles. Gryffindor's front line was also led by a 7th year. Frank Longbottom. Regulus knew the name. Beside him stood a tall red-haired boy, likely from the Pruitt or Weasley family. James and Sirius were wedged behind Frank, still shouting, the situation nearly out of control. This was no longer a team dispute. It was a confrontation between two houses. Wands came out one after another. Someone had already begun the first syllable of a spell. Regulus quickened his pace. He needed to cut through the Slytherin ranks. At the very edge were younger students. Seeing him approach, they moved aside instinctively. Deeper in were 3rd and 4th years. Almost all of them recognized him. Some shifted to let him pass. Others frowned and stared. Cuthbert, Hermes, and Alex followed him. When they reached the 4th-year section, Cuthbert hesitated, then stopped and took his place there. Hermes and Alex stopped as well, standing together. Ahead lay the domain of the upper years. Regulus could go farther. They could not. Regulus did not slow. A fifth year reached out as if to block him. One calm glance from Regulus, and the hand withdrew. In the sixth year core, several students stared at him with unfriendly eyes. Lucretius Burke heard the movement behind him and turned. Seeing Regulus, his brow lifted slightly. He said nothing. Narcissa also looked back. When she saw him, she shifted just enough to open a space at her side. Chapter 47, Defusing the Conflict. Regulus moved to the very front and stopped beside Narcissa. A sixth year from the Knot family snorted and muttered, "Black kid, there's no place for you here." Regulus ignored him, but he remembered the face. His gaze shifted to the opposite side of the corridor. Frank Longbottom already had his wand raised, the tip beginning to glow. It was the opening movement of a disarming charm. Almost at the same moment, Lucretius Burke lifted his hand as well. They were about to start. Regulus was faster. His right hand flicked, wand snapping forward. A burst of invisible force slammed into Frank Longbottom's wand. It was not a spell at all, just raw magical interference. Frank's casting rhythm shattered, and the light at his wand tip collapsed instantly. The trick itself was not impressive. Any experienced adult wizard could have handled it easily. Against a student with limited combat experience, it was exactly enough. At the same time, Regulus's left hand closed around Lucretius Burke's wrist. Lucretius had been about to cast when his wrist was suddenly pinned. He reacted on instinct, trying to wrench free, but the grip was like iron. It was not just physical strength. Something stranger was at work. He felt his magic choke at the source, the flow cut off midstream. His entire arm went numb, and his wand nearly slipped from his fingers. He turned sharply, shock written across his face. Regulus did not look at him. His eyes were on Narcissa. His goal was to stop a house clash before it ignited. Any spell could become the spark, so he chose disruption and restraint instead. Narcissa had been about to draw her wand. When she met Regulus's eyes, she saw him give the faintest shake of his head. Her wrist paused. She did not move. The entire exchange lasted only a moment. Students on both sides froze. Everyone saw Regulus act. Both prefects stopped at the same time, and no one understood why. They could not make sense of it. On the Gryffindor side, Frank Longbottom stared at his wand, then at Regulus, disbelief plain on his face. On the Slytherin side, Lucretius was still trying to pull free, but the hand on his wrist did not budge. James Potter could not see what was happening and kept shouting from the crowd, "Dirty tricks! Snakes!" Sirius joined in, bouncing at his side. "No honor at all. Enough!" Frank Longbottom cut them off. His eyes stayed on Regulus. "Who are you?" "Regulus Black." Regulus released Lucretius's wrist. His posture was reserved, but his presence filled the space. "First year. First year." Frank frowned and glanced past him at Lucretius and Narcissa. Two seventh-year prefects were allowing a first year to stand in front? He knew who Regulus Black was. What he did not know was how this Black had managed that. Lucretius flexed his wrist, his expression dark. He said nothing. Narcissa stepped half a pace forward, positioning herself just behind Regulus. It looked like support, or perhaps protection. Regulus looked back to Frank. "Prefect Longbottom, Madame Hooch's ruling has already taken effect. If Gryffindor disputes the call, there is a formal process for appeal. This is not the place." He turned his head toward Slytherin, though the words were meant for both sides. As for fouls during the match, the referee issued warnings. Competing within the limits of the rules is part of sport. If the rules feel unfair, push to change them, or learn to play within them. Post-match retaliation is not dignified. James opened his mouth again, but Frank raised a hand to stop him. The seventh-year prefect studied Regulus for a few seconds, then nodded. "You're right. This should go to the professors." He lowered his wand. The Gryffindor students behind him followed suit, one by one, though their glares remained sharp. At that moment, Professor McGonagall and Professor Slughorn arrived. The two professors forced their way through the crowd. Seeing that the standoff had broken, both of them let out quiet breaths. Professor McGonagall's gaze swept over both sides, stern and commanding. "All of you, return to your common rooms at once. Prefects, control your houses." Professor Slughorn stepped in front of Regulus, his round face split by an approving smile. Handled very well, Mr. Black. Slytherin and Gryffindor should not come to this over a match. Regulus dipped his head slightly. I only wanted to keep things from escalating, Professor. A wise approach. Slughorn patted his shoulder, then looked to Lucretius and Narcissa. Take Slytherin back. The crowd began to disperse. As Regulus turned, he felt a gaze on him. He looked toward the professor's platform. Dumbledore was still seated, watching from afar. The eyes behind his half-moon glasses were unreadable. Regulus did not linger. He looked away and headed back. The Slytherin students parted for him automatically. This time, it was not just the younger ones. Even upper years made room. Some faces showed displeasure but stayed silent. Others frowned in thought. A few were simply enjoying the spectacle. Cuthbert, Hermes, and Alex caught up to him. Cuthbert leaned close and whispered, Regulus, just now you. Later, Regulus said, cutting him off. When the corridor finally emptied, Professor Slughorn and Professor McGonagall exchanged a look. Slughorn's face was full of admiration as he stared at the space where Regulus had vanished. Minerva, that was impressive, was it not? His handling was efficient, Professor McGonagall replied, concern threading her voice. But he's only a first year. It's too early. She remembered Dumbledore's words. Regulus had no interest in authority. Yet for a wizard, power and influence together became authority. And Regulus was acquiring both at an alarming pace. In other houses, this might not have mattered. In Slytherin, it was different. Some people are destined to stand out, Slughorn said cheerfully. Professor McGonagall remained thoughtful. She decided she would speak to Dumbledore later about Mr. Black. Perhaps. That night, in the Slytherin common room. The fireplace burned hot, green flames casting shifting shadows across the stone walls. Most students were murmuring about the match. They had won, but it had not felt satisfying. Many resented Regulus for stopping what could have been a proper clash with Gryffindor. Still, given Regulus's growing reputation and the strength he had displayed, no one dared confront him yet. Regulus occupied a sofa by himself, an unmarked book resting on his knees. He was practicing constant protego. He had already passed the introductory stage and now possessed a solid defensive capability. Around 9 o'clock, Lucretius arrived. He sat on the sofa opposite Regulus. After a few seconds of silence, he spoke. About today, Lucretius said, his voice subdued, no longer carrying the polished arrogance of their first meeting. When you pinned my wrist, how did you do that? Regulus leaned back slightly and looked at him. Just a small technique. A small technique. Lucretius lifted his right hand and rolled his wrist. It's still a little numb. My magic doesn't flow smoothly. I thought about it all afternoon. I even asked Professor Slughorn. He said it was a very advanced method, direct magical interference through physical contact. Yet you're only a first year. How? His voice was low, meant only for the two of them. When he finished, his stare locked onto Regulus, intense and unyielding. Regulus met his gaze calmly, expression flat. Lucretius Burke, eldest son of the Burke family, future heir to Borgin and Burke's, the antique shop that dealt in both light and dark. In the original timeline, this family had stayed ambiguous during Voldemort's first rise, and somehow emerged unscathed. Borgin himself was shrewd and powerful. Even Voldemort had worked in his shop once, and Borgin still survived untouched afterward. People like that deserved caution. Lucretius, however, was still too green. Everyone has their strengths, Regulus said, offering a half-truth. My control over magic is relatively precise. Precise enough to cut off someone else's magic flow. Lucretius did not believe him. My father can't even do that. Perhaps your father never showed you. Lucretius fell silent. Then he laughed, a hint of self-mockery in it. Fine. If you don't want to say it, I won't push. But Black, I owe you one. If you hadn't stepped in today and I'd actually fought Longbottom, Professor McGonagall would have docked Slytherin at least 50 points. A prefect leading a fight would cost more than 50. Regulus followed his line smoothly. He doubted Lucretius cared much about house points anyway. For pure-blood Slytherin prefects at this age, points were just a tool to maintain status, nothing more. So I owe you one. Lucretius stood, then glanced back before leaving. Regulus shrugged, unconcerned. Forcing a favor on someone could be an effective social move. He watched Lucretius's back and considered the shift in attitude. The change was obvious, from condescension to an equal exchange. That was a good sign. Show strength. Reap the return. Chapter 48, A Conversation with Narcissa bonus. About 10 minutes later, Narcissa arrived as well. She did not sit at first. Instead, she stood beside the sofa, looking down at Regulus. Firelight warmed her blonde hair with a soft glow, but her expression was serious. "You scared me today," Narcissa said quietly. "Sorry." Regulus looked up at her. He understood what she meant. Cousin Narcissa cared far more about family than Bellatrix ever had. She had warned him more than once to mind his limits when showing his abilities. Even before he started at Hogwarts, she had shared the lessons she had learned herself. Regulus could feel her concern, and because it came from family, he always treated her with genuine sincerity. Still, Regulus had his own considerations. He was not truly a child. "It's not a bad thing." Narcissa sat down beside him, movements graceful as ever. "I just, suddenly realized you've grown up. Uncle Orion wrote to me, asked me to keep an eye on you at school. Aunt Walburga mentioned it too. But now it seems you don't need anyone watching over you." Regulus did not respond, but his gaze softened. Narcissa continued, "The way you handled things today was very mature. But it was also dangerous. You put yourself in the open. More people will start watching you. Let them watch." Regulus's tone was firm. He meant it partly to reassure her. In truth, he did not care much at all. He was far clearer in his own mind. As a first year, he still needed to act within the rules, to stay under the professor's eyes, to maintain the image of an exemplary student. But at the core, he did not need to look up to the upper years. It was not arrogance. It was a matter of fact. What filled their minds, all that so-called house politics and pure-blood maneuvering, looked laughably shallow to him. 2 years from now, when he reached third year, how precise would his magical control be? How many constellations would his meditation encompass? How many spells would he master, and how strong would his magic become? By then, the people worth comparing himself to would no longer be Hogwarts students, but the so-called elite aurors of the Ministry of Magic, perhaps even certain professors. After all, Voldemort had created a Horcrux by 5th year. What was Regulus lacking? His gaze had never lingered on mediocrity. "Cousin Narcissa," Regulus said at last, his voice lower than before. "You're worried about me drawing attention. But from another angle, letting people see my position clearly might be safer." Narcissa frowned slightly. "What do you mean?" "The Black family's heir will stand somewhere sooner or later. Instead of letting others guess, test, and scheme in the dark, it's better for me to set the tone myself. That's stronger than hiding." He paused, watching her reaction. When she did not object, he continued. "As for choosing sides, cousin, let's talk about that." Regulus leaned forward slightly, his voice dropping. "Bellatrix's side? Voldemort's side? I know they're recruiting. I also understand the Black family's current stance." Narcissa did not interrupt. Her eyes told him to go on. "But I want to ask," Regulus said, meeting her gaze directly. "Does the Black family, or the Sacred 28, really have only 2 choices?" Narcissa's breath caught. He had not spelled it out, but she knew the 2 choices he meant. Allegiance to Voldemort, or alignment with Dumbledore. "A wizarding family that has lasted 1,000 years, Regulus continued, does it survive by betting on the right side every time power shifts? Or does it endure because no matter who rises, the family remains standing?" As he spoke, a thought stayed unspoken. In the original timeline, the Black family had been the counterexample. They had bet blindly on Voldemort and nearly wiped themselves out. That had been Walburga's fanaticism, Sirius's rebellion, and a chain of compounded mistakes. If Regulus was here, it did not have to end that way. Narcissa fell silent for a long time. Firelight flickered across her face. "Regulus," she said softly, "you know Bellatrix is very trusted by him right now." Regulus leaned back against the sofa, eyes resting on the dancing flames, his expression calm. After a few seconds, he looked back at her. "Cousin," Regulus asked, "does the Black family need that trust?" Narcissa froze. It was a question she had never truly considered. Did the Black family need it? That was Voldemort. Yet as the thought settled, his earlier words returned to her. 1,000-year-old family. Did it really have to throw itself entirely to one side? Why was every pureblood family debating which side to join? Whose problem was that, exactly? Regulus went on, his tone easing. Bellatrix is a member of the Black family. The trust she gains is, naturally, also a resource for the family. But how that resource is used, who uses it, and when, that all matters. He looked at Narcissa steadily. She seemed momentarily lost in thought. An investment should be judged by long-term return. Betting everything for a short-term surge is something gamblers do, not families that survive for centuries. He was speaking with extreme restraint. He could only imply that Voldemort would not last forever. He could not say more. Narcissa's pupils contracted slightly. She understood part of it, and began to notice things she had never examined before. Bellatrix devoted herself entirely to that great cause. She gave everything she was. But to the Black family, Bellatrix was still only one member. Regulus was talking about legacy. So you mean? Narcissa's voice turned cautious. The Black family shouldn't rely on only one path. I mean, Regulus said gently, if a tree has only one deep root and all the others wither, what holds it steady when the storm comes? He looked at her. The firelight made his grey eyes seem unusually deep. Cousin, the Black family is not a sapling. We have many roots. That man needs power, Regulus said, returning to the topic from a different angle. And power comes in many forms. Fanatical loyalty is one kind. A clear, rational mind is another. Warriors who charge into battle are one kind. Those who manage resources and stabilize the rear are far rarer. He continued, Bellatrix has already proven the Black family can provide the first. What if we can also provide the second? Narcissa drew in a slow breath. Looking at her 11-year-old cousin, she felt a chill of realization. He had never once said he would not be loyal. He had even affirmed that man's needs throughout. Yet the meaning was unmistakable. The Black family should join as a collaborator, even a strategic provider of resources, not as a mere follower. It was far more sophisticated. And far more difficult. These ideas. Narcissa's voice was dry. Have you said any of this to Uncle Orion? Regulus shook his head. My father will understand. He thought of the family ring. The key to the restricted library. His father's reminders to be restrained. Orion Black had never been a fanatic. He was a pragmatic head of house. Sending his son to Slytherin, allowing and even supporting Regulus's independence, all of it was laying groundwork for this goal. When the storm came, even if the Black family boarded the ship, they would sit in a cabin with windows, not be locked in the hold. Narcissa nodded slowly. She understood now. Not only his reasoning, but why he had acted the way he did today. He had been displaying the second kind of power. The ability to manage a situation and weigh outcomes. That message was for every observer, including the one who might be watching from afar. I understand, Narcissa said solemnly. So you need information. Information that helps the family make the right judgments. Yes. Regulus leaned forward slightly, adopting a more trusting posture. Cousin, what we lack right now isn't a stance. It's perspective. Relying only on what comes from Bellatrix is like walking with one eye closed, and that eye is crooked. Narcissa immediately thought of Bellatrix's letters, thick with fevered devotion, and her increasingly extreme behavior. If the Black family listened to only that voice, it would be disastrous. I'll pay attention, Narcissa promised seriously. Not just the Malfoys, but the Lestranges, other families, and rumors within the Ministry of Magic. If it has value, I'll tell you. Through secure means, Regulus added. Or face to face. He could not risk sensitive information ever touching parchment. Voldemort's need for control was absolute. There was no telling how he might monitor others. Narcissa nodded. All right. With the core of the discussion settled, Regulus finally relaxed. His tone grew lighter. By the way, cousin, he asked casually, is old Mr. Malfoy's health any better? The question sounded like nothing more than a younger relative checking on an elder. Chapter 49, Position Matters. Narcissa froze for a moment. She did not believe Regulus truly cared about Abraxas Malfoy's health. In fact, she doubted Regulus wanted Abraxas to be healthy at all. If it were any other young wizard, the question might have been genuine concern, or simple social courtesy. But Regulus? By now, she understood all too well that Regulus was nothing like ordinary children. The depth and complexity of his thinking surpassed that of many seasoned elders. His perspective was unconventional, even sharp-edged. Abraxas Malfoy, Lucius's father, current head of the Malfoy family. A man cunning to the bone. His health directly affected the Malfoy family's future direction. Just some minor issues, Narcissa answered carefully. His spirits are good. Her heart lay with the Blacks, and she cared deeply about Regulus. Still, the Malfoys were her future in-laws. Regulus smiled. Then I should prepare a proper gift. He had already received an invitation to the Malfoy family's Christmas dinner. A personal invitation, separate from the Black family, which spoke either of importance or hidden intent. They exchanged a few more words of harmless family chatter. Narcissa stood, reached out, and gently adjusted the collar of Regulus's robes before saying goodbye. At the entrance to the girls' dormitory, she glanced back at him. Her gaze was complicated, but in the end it became a small nod. Regulus remained on the sofa alone until the fire burned low. He reviewed the conversation in his mind. The goals had been met. Deeper trust had been established, a channel for information sharing clarified, and his position conveyed without stating anything that could be seized upon. Nothing dangerous had been said, yet everything that needed saying had been said. Narcissa was sharp, pragmatic, and placed family above all else. She had her own bottom line. In the original story, she had betrayed Voldemort for Draco. Regulus decided to trust her a little more. Narcissa would soon marry Lucius Malfoy, and for now, the Malfoy family was still under Abraxas's control. That old Malfoy was no harmless figure. In the early days of cooperation with Voldemort, the Malfoys had even held the upper hand. Later, Abraxas died suddenly of dragon pox, and Lucius took over. From that point on, the Malfoys became little more than Voldemort's purse. Dragon pox, an incurable disease in the wizarding world. Wizards without real ability did not catch it. Abraxas's death had been too sudden. The timing was far too convenient. Regulus did not believe in coincidence. If there were nothing behind it, that would be harder to believe than the opposite. He decided that after returning home for Christmas, he would mention it to Orion. If there was anything hidden behind the Malfoys' change, the Blacks needed to know early. He thought of the tragedies in the original story. Sirius breaking completely with the family. Walburga dying without ever understanding her eldest son, and never knowing how her younger one died. Narcissa and Bellatrix walking different paths, their sisterhood hollow in name only. In the end, aside from Narcissa and the disowned Andromeda, not a single Black survived. Too many misunderstandings. Too many information gaps. Everyone lost. He would not repeat that path. Besides, he was not exactly harmless either. When Regulus pushed open the dormitory door, Cuthbert was sitting on his bed, polishing his wand. Hermes was writing at his desk. Alex was curled under his blankets, only half his head showing. Regulus, Cuthbert looked up at once. Weren't you afraid it would turn into a fight today? He had been holding that question in all day. He could not understand why Regulus had stepped forward in that situation. It did not match the Regulus he thought he knew, nor the upbringing he associated with the Black family. Earlier that day, one wrong move and Regulus could have been targeted by everyone. No matter how capable he was, how could he handle being swarmed? Regulus removed his outer robe and hung it up. He had no intention of answering directly. He was not afraid of a real fight. The leaders of both houses had been present, and he had neutralized them instantly. He had also kept his eye on the real troublemakers, Sirius, James Potter, and several of Slytherin's more poisonous types. He was confident he could suppress them. And he did not fear being targeted by students at all. Regulus turned back to Cuthbert. What benefit would a fight give me? Cuthbert blinked. That was not what he had meant. House points lost, detention, possible injuries. Regulus sat on the edge of his bed. Stopping the conflict lets me show capability, solidify my position, and leave a good impression on the professors. Which one sounds like the better deal? Cuthbert thought it through, then frowned. But doesn't that make you look too restrained? Some of the older students were talking in the common room. They said you were too. Regulus raised a brow slightly. He knew the original words had not been so polite. Let them talk. He did not care. What I need is influence, not empty displays of toughness. After today, Lucretius Burke owes me a favor. Frank Longbottom has to consider whether he would have been punished if I hadn't stepped in. Professor McGonagall and Professor Slughorn both saw how I handled it. That's far more valuable than throwing punches with Gryffindor in a corridor. Influence was abstract, but at certain moments, it could be turned into power. That required constant, subtle accumulation. Cuthbert thought for a moment, then nodded slowly. I get it. You're putting yourself in the position of the one who solves problems. Heirs trained by pure-blood families were rarely fools. With a little guidance, Cuthbert reached the key point on his own. Good, Regulus said, offering rare praise. So, Cuthbert, keep an eye out. Who disagrees with me the most? Who's complaining the loudest behind my back? Cuthbert's eyes lit up. You're going to deal with them. No. Regulus shook his head. I want to know who's stupid. Real opponents won't jump out over something this trivial. Only fools turn hostile over a single Quidditch match. Just remember who they are. They might be useful later. He looked at Hermes. What about you? Notice anything today? Hermes set down his quill and turned halfway around. Robustan Lestrange. During the match, he was sitting behind us, watching you the entire time. After the game, he left the stands immediately, but didn't go back to the common room. I had Rosier follow him for a bit. Alex poked his head out of the blankets and spoke softly. He went to an abandoned potions classroom on the 4th floor. He was alone. Stayed about 10 minutes before coming out. Regulus narrowed his eyes. He immediately marked Robustan as someone with hostile intent. An annoyance more than a threat. Not worth his own time. This was exactly the sort of thing better handed to his roommates. He turned to face them. Can you handle it before Christmas? Hermes's mouth curved into a dark smile. I have an idea. Regulus stopped participating after that. This was meant to be a small task for them, something to build cohesion. He returned to his bed and organized the textbooks he would need the next day. Cuthbert watched him, then asked again, by the way, Regulus. What you did today, was it really just about showing influence? Nothing else. Regulus did not stop moving. What do you mean? I mean. Cuthbert hesitated, choosing his words carefully. You seemed very focused on controlling the situation. In the corridor, you stepped to the front immediately. You acted immediately. It didn't feel like a spur-of-the-moment decision. Regulus turned and looked at him. The Avery's air was observant. His thinking was not yet deep, but he tried to look beneath the surface. That was a good quality, especially among pure-blood families. Cuthbert, Regulus said slowly, in Slytherin, there are two kinds of people. One waits for things to happen and reacts afterward. The other predicts what will happen and prepares in advance. He went on, Slytherin winning through fouls meant Gryffindor would cause trouble afterward. That was inevitable. If it's inevitable, I plan for it ahead of time, instead of scrambling once the conflict breaks out. Cuthbert nodded, thoughtful. He understood that Regulus was describing the second type. As for why I had to stand at the very front, Regulus let a faint smile show. Because position determines perspective. From the back, all you see is chaos. From the front, you see everyone's reactions. Who's impulsive, who's calm, who's observing quietly, who's fanning the flames. He recalled the faces in the corridor that day. Lucretius Burke's shock when his wrist was pinned. The worry and concern in Narcissa's eyes. Frank Longbottom's disbelief when his casting was disrupted. James Potter and Sirius shouting in the crowd, ignored and powerless. All of it was only visible from the front. Chapter 50, Paths That Never Cross. The first school year was drawing to a close. Christmas break was only a day away. Regulus closed his eyes, letting his awareness sink inward. Star-guided meditation had become the foundation of his daily routine, as natural as breathing itself. Nearly half a year of growth had unfolded around this practice. Body and soul were tempered in tandem, refined through the steady motion of the star rails. Magic was no longer just energy flowing through him. It had fused deeply with muscle, bone, blood, and wool, becoming a single, unified whole. What once required deliberate guidance, magic circulation, had turned instinctive. Every breath now carried magic through his body, nourishing it. Bone density and muscle fibers strengthened quietly, without fanfare. Even without protego, ordinary spells could hardly injure him at the root. This was the natural result of the body as a vessel resonating in harmony with magic and soul. The changes to his soul were even more striking. The 3 layers of occlumency no longer needed conscious maintenance. The star model itself had become the strongest barrier. The 4-star synchronized Orion configuration rotated steadily in his mind. Betelgeuse's dark red glow and the silver-white belt stars formed a miniature cosmos, stable and precise. It did more than sharpen his will. It tempered his mind. External noise, emotional turbulence from others, none of it could easily shake him anymore. Body as the foundation. Soul as the core. Magic as the bridge. Guided by the star, all 3 were evolving toward a more complete state. But the 5th star had failed to ignite. The target was Bellatrix of Orion. The failure had nothing to do with complex calculations or overwhelming data. It was simply a barrier of magic itself. During the attempted integration, the star model in his consciousness destabilized violently. The 4-star balance collapsed, magic surged backward, and pain pulsed sharply at his temples. He had been forced to stop. Still, failure was not without value. The attempt itself was a form of refinement. To accommodate Bellatrix's integration, he had pushed his control precision to another level. His mental resilience strengthened through repeated cycles of collapse and reconstruction. The 4-star model became even more stable in the process. The compatibility between his magic and soul deepened almost imperceptibly. Growth at the edge of one's limits always paid off, and this time was no exception. Regulus opened his eyes. Outside the window, the giant squid drifted past, its massive shadow lingering briefly across his face. He stood and headed toward the corridor leading to the Gryffindor Tower. Their meeting point was beside the one-eyed witch statue on the 3rd floor. Few people passed through there. When Regulus arrived, Sirius was already waiting. He leaned against the wall, hands tucked into the pockets of his faded jeans. The red and gold Gryffindor robes were slung casually over his shoulder, revealing a dark muggle shirt beneath. Without James and Remus at his side, the wild bravado he usually carried had dulled. The rebellion in his grey eyes had softened, replaced by something heavier and more complicated. When he noticed Regulus approaching, he straightened slightly. His gaze dropped to the cracks between the stones, fingers absently picking at the rough wall. "A letter came from home," Regulus said first. His voice was calm, stripped of excess emotion. Sirius's shoulders tensed almost imperceptibly. His Adam's apple bobbed once. Of course he had received letters too. Thick parchment, heavy with Walburga's fury and condemnation. Every line demanded to know why he had betrayed the family, why he had chosen Gryffindor, why he associated with those of Muggle birth. There had also been a letter from Orion. No shouting, no overt anger. Just carefully chosen words about the family's future and the Black name's responsibilities. Expectations that weighed even heavier for their restraint. Sirius had answered none of them. At Hogwarts, he had found his own circle. James's warmth. Remus's quiet kindness. Peter's compliance. All of it made him feel like he had escaped the suffocating shadow of 12 Grimald Place. In Gryffindor, Sirius thrived. Friends, adventures, freedom. Yet the Black family's sensitivity and stubbornness still ran in his blood. Family remained a corner of his heart he refused to touch. A small thorn, sharp enough to ache from time to time. "They want you to come home for Christmas," Regulus added, watching his face. Sirius was silent for a long time. Dust sifted down from the stone cracks beneath his fingers. He lifted his head. His eyes met Regulus's, filled with resistance, confusion, and a flicker of hesitation he did not even realize was there. He wanted to say, "I'm not going back." Instead, what came out was a low, uncertain question, his voice trembling just slightly. "Go back? With them? With Lestrange, Malfoy, not, Caro. Voldemort's lapdogs?" His brow drew tight. His nostrils flared, disgust plain on his face. "You're going to, aren't you?" Sirius stared at him. There was anger there, disappointment too, and something else that might have been worry. "You'll put on dress robes, raise a glass, and laugh with the Death Eaters, right?" He had received Bellatrix's letter as well. Those feverish words, the worship of Voldemort, the obsession with pure-blood glory, all of it left him feeling smothered. He knew the Black family would have to choose eventually. And that choice was the path he despised most. Dividing worth by blood. Enforcing order through violence. That was not glory. It was rot wrapped in chains. Regulus fell silent. Winter sunlight streamed through the high windows, casting his long shadow across the stone floor. He saw the naked rejection in Sirius's eyes and understood that his brother would never turn back. There was no need to persuade him. No desire to. Some paths had to be walked alone. Some stances had to be held by one's own will. Regulus's very existence served as a signpost pushing Sirius toward a different road. Only by severing himself completely from the Black family's old path could Sirius survive what was coming. Yes, Regulus said, nodding once. His answer was unambiguous. Sirius looked as though he had expected it, and yet the words still cut. His breathing stuttered. The trace of a mocking smile vanished, replaced by a dull, exhausted numbness. He stepped back half a pace, leaning against the wall again. His head lowered, black hair falling forward to hide his eyes. I'm not going back. That place isn't my home. I know, Regulus replied evenly. I'm only passing along their wishes. Regulus. Sirius looked up sharply, his voice rising. Are you really going down that road? Standing with those lunatics? Wearing those damned black robes, putting on those damned masks? You're smarter than them. You're not like them. You know exactly what they're doing. Murder, persecution, and ruling through fear. Regulus looked at him. The boy a year and a half older than himself stood there stripped of bravado, the edges of him still not fully hardened. I'm walking the Black family's path, Regulus said. His tone did not change. Just like you're walking Gryffindor's. We made different choices. That isn't the Black family's path. It's a path to destruction. Sirius's voice climbed higher as he stepped forward. You think they'll tolerate the Blacks? They only want obedient dogs. The moment you stop being useful, they'll throw you away like trash. Regulus did not answer. He knew Sirius was right. And still, this was how it had to be. He reached out and rested a hand briefly on Sirius's shoulder. Take care of yourself. Then he turned and walked away. His dark green robes left a fleeting afterimage in the corridor. He did not look back. Behind him, Sirius remained frozen in place. His brow furrowed, anger tangled with a growing, chaotic confusion. Why? Regulus understood everything. He saw their madness clearly. Why throw himself into it anyway? Regulus was not foolish. He never had been. If anything, he was sharp, calculating. That only made it harder to understand. Did he not see the Black family walking straight into a fire? Did he not see that so-called pure-blood glory was nothing more than bait Voldemort used to lure followers? Was it for inheritance? That had never seemed to matter to Regulus. Had their mother's ideology finally taken hold? But even as a child, Regulus had dared to question her. He did not know what Regulus thought about late at night. He did not know what he saw when he stared at the stars. He did not know what purpose drove him down this road. He only knew that from this moment on, he and Regulus were truly walking two paths that would never cross again. Chapter 51, Spatial Magic Bonus. The library was a stop Regulus had to make before leaving school. Several books needed to be returned. It was quiet enough to hear the faint rustle of turning pages. Most students had already packed and were ready to head home. Only a handful remained, bent over their research. Regulus moved slowly along the shelves when a hesitant voice sounded behind him. Regulus. He turned. Lily Evans stood between two rows of shelves, arms full of thick books. The top one was advanced potion making. Lily. Regulus paused and greeted her warmly. She stepped closer, her voice tight with nerves. I wanted to send you a Christmas gift, but I don't know your home address. Could you tell me? Lily's green eyes fixed on his grey ones, hope flickering through them. Regulus was silent for a moment. When he spoke, his tone was still gentle, tinged with apology. I'm sorry, Lily. The Black family address is protected by ancient magic. I'm bound from revealing it. External mail, especially anything sent through non-magical channels, can't be delivered directly either. 12. Grimald Place was wrapped Indiana powerful protective enchantments. The address itself carried magic. It was a top-level secret. Even knowing it could trigger defensive wards. On top of that, Walburga despised anything connected to the Muggle world. A gift from a Muggle family would not only be destroyed, it could cause Lily unnecessary trouble. The light faded from Lily's expression. She lowered her head, red hair falling forward to hide her eyes. After a long pause, her voice came out quiet and subdued. Is it because my family is Muggle? It has nothing to do with that. Regulus shook his head. There were indeed wards at 12 Grimald Place that blocked Muggle mail. If he truly wanted to receive something, there were ways around it. He simply could not say that. Anyone outside the family who learns the address triggers the defenses. There are no exceptions. Even close relatives would be cursed if they revealed it casually. The magic automatically screens bloodlines. Unapproved parcels are destroyed on arrival, and the sender can be affected as well. Lily listened, then nodded. She let out a small breath of relief. This was all foreign to her. Hogwarts classes never covered things like family wards, address curses, or automatic bloodline screening. These were secrets passed down through pure-blood families, magic woven into old walls and genealogies. The other pure-blood students she knew never brought these things up. They did not explain them, and they never thought they needed to. To them, it was common sense. As natural as knowing the sun rises in the east. If someone like Lily, born to Muggles, crossed a taboo out of ignorance, it was never seen as their problem. It was simply a mudblood lacking manners. She had never tried to ingratiate herself with anyone. She had only decided that Regulus was someone worth befriending. Respect and equality were rare things in a world soaked in blood prejudice. As long as Regulus was not rejecting her gift or her friendship, the address did not matter. She did not ask again. She only held her books a little tighter. She turned to leave, then stopped. Looking back at him, her green eyes curved into a gentle smile. Then, I'll give it to you after the holidays. Is that okay? Yes. Regulus nodded without hesitation. If you don't mind, tell me your address. I'd like to send you a gift as well. Lily blinked, then smiled in earnest. It's 4 Privet Drive, Cokeworth. Merry Christmas, Lily. You too, Regulus. He watched her disappear at the end of the shelves and let out a quiet sigh. The gap between worlds was never something goodwill alone could erase. Still, this friendship was one he intended to protect. The next morning, the Hogwarts Express arrived right on time. The platform buzzed with noise. Students crowded together, laughter mixing with the hoots of owls. Regulus carried his trunk. Hermes was staying at school. Cuthbert and Alex followed behind as the three joined the flow toward the train. Cuthbert leaned in, lowering his voice, barely hiding his schadenfreude. That Lestrange didn't get to leave. Heard he was doing dark magic experiments in an abandoned classroom yesterday. Professor McGonagall caught him in the act. He got injured too. He's spending Christmas in the hospital wing and getting detention after the break. Regulus lifted a brow but did not ask for details. Rabaston's outcome had been expected. Hermes and Cuthbert were not subtle, but they were effective. Isn't that Potter? Alex said suddenly. Regulus followed his gaze. James Potter stood by the train doors, laughing with Remus and Peter. Sirius leaned against the carriage, still wearing those faded jeans. When he saw Regulus, the smile on his face stalled, then he turned away. Lily stood nearby, saying goodbye to another girl. When she noticed Regulus, she waved, smiling openly. Regulus inclined his head in return. The whistle blew. Regulus boarded the train and took a seat by the window. Cuthbert and Alex sat across from him, excitedly discussing plans to visit Diagon Alley for the latest broom models, and to check out a newly opened magic shop in Nocturne Alley. Regulus did not join in. He watched the scenery slide past the window instead. Fields, forests, cottages blanketed in snow, like a frozen painting. By the time the train reached King's Cross, the snowfall had thickened. Flakes melted on his shoulders, leaving a brief chill behind. He said goodbye to Cuthbert and Alex, then headed alone toward a quiet corner at the edge of the platform. Master! Creaker's voice sounded beside him. The house elf wore a tattered linen cloth and bowed deeply, his nose nearly brushing the ground. Master has sent me to take you home. Regulus nodded. Let's go. Creaker raised a withered hand. A faint silver light flickered at his fingertips. No wand. No incantation. There was not even a clear surge of magic. An invisible barrier wrapped around them. The surroundings twisted and blurred. The noise of the platform cut off as if muted, vanishing in an instant. Space no longer felt like an obstacle. It was more like fabric, easily folded. They stood at a crease, and in the blink of an eye, the distance was crossed. When Regulus opened his eyes again, they were standing in the entrance hall of the Black family home. Indigo flames burned in the fireplace. Portraits along the walls turned to look at him, whispers rising and falling. Regulus remained still. The moment of spatial displacement lingered vividly in his mind. It was fundamentally different from apparition. He had read detailed accounts of apparition in the family archives and heard Orion describe the sensation himself. It was like being forced into a narrow rubber tube, then shoved out the other end. A wizard had to focus completely on the destination. Any mistake risked splinching. The entire process was filled with crushing pressure. As if space itself were being torn open, forced through, then exited violently. It was a method of brute passage, fighting against spatial resistance. Every jump came with intense discomfort and severe distance limitations. Kriaker's magic was nothing like that. There was no pressure. No resistance. No discomfort at all. It felt as though space itself had stepped aside for them. Or perhaps they had simply moved from one point to another, with no process in between. This was pure spatial displacement. No resistance to overcome. Movement that followed the rules of space rather than fighting them. Regulus flexed his fingers, magic flowing lightly over his skin. House elves could perform complex magic without wands. They could appear at their master's side instantly, no matter the distance. This movement seemed unrestricted by wards. Even anti-apparition spells were useless against it. In the cave where he would one day die, a place even Dumbledore could not apparate into, Kriaker had moved freely. If he could unravel the nature of this spatial magic, it might break free of the rigid framework of wizarding spells. No incantations. No wands. No distance limits. Perhaps even gravity itself could be discarded. True freedom of movement. And that was the necessary path to the stars. To break past the atmosphere and explore the cosmos, spatial magic was indispensable. Once the thought took hold, it refused to let go. Chapter 52, I've already held back bonus. Regulus had barely steadied himself in the entrance hall of 12 Grimald Place when Walburga hurried over. She wore a dark green robe embroidered with the Black family crest. My Regulus. She reached out and clasped his arm firmly. You're finally home. Look at you, you've grown taller, and you look so well. Her gaze swept over his immaculate robes and neatly curled hair, then settled on the family brooch at his chest. Pride nearly spilled from her eyes. I've read all of Hogwarts' letters. Slytherin chief, top marks in every subject, and you even showed those blind fools what a Black is capable of. Well done. Orion stood by the fireplace. His expression was as restrained as ever, but the satisfaction in his eyes was unmistakable. He stepped forward and placed a hand on Regulus's shoulder, the weight of it steady and solid. It's good to have you back. Walburga tugged Regulus toward the sitting room, talking non-stop. Kriaker's already prepared your room. I had him keep the vines outside the window. You used to stare at them for hours when you were little. She paused, then shifted topics as if it were the most natural thing in the world. Where's Sirius? Didn't he come back with you? The cheerful atmosphere froze instantly. The portraits on the walls exchanged glances. A Victorian-era Aunt's stress let out a faint sigh. Regulus remained composed. He isn't coming back. Not coming back. Walburga's voice shot up. The smile vanished, replaced by anger and disappointment. That ungrateful child. I knew it. Ruined by those idiotic Gryffindors, refusing to come home for Christmas. Her fists clenched. One day, he'll pay for that rebellion. Orion frowned slightly but did not argue. He only gave Regulus a look, signaling him not to mind it. Regulus truly did not mind. He had expected this outcome. Walburga's fury flared and faded just as quickly. After a few more sharp words about Sirius, her attention swung back to Regulus, her tone turning eager again. Forget that ungrateful boy. Tell me everything. What exactly have you been doing at school? Professor Slughorn said your potions are better than most fifth years. Is that true? And that Traverse? I heard he provoked you and ended up completely put in his place. She already knew every detail through various channels, yet she insisted on hearing it directly from him. Regulus followed her lead and gave a brief account of his potions classes and the conflict with Traverse. He added nothing extra, simply stated the facts. Walburga listened with shining eyes, clicking her tongue in satisfaction. That's how it should be. A Black never tolerates being wronged. Those fools deserve to learn their place. Dinner was set in the dining room. A deep red velvet tablecloth covered the long table. Silver cutlery gleamed coldly in the firelight. Cracker served dish after dish. Roast turkey, lamb chops, mashed potatoes, pumpkin pie. All things Regulus had liked as a child. Well, not the turkey. Turkey was dry, and he never cared for it. Only 3 people sat at the table, yet it was laden as if to fill the absence Sirius left behind. As she served Regulus more food, Walburga continued talking. The glory of pure-blood families will rest on you in the end. Look at the Malfoys. Lucius is decent enough, but he's still nowhere near your level. As for the Lestranges, only Bella is worth mentioning. Rodolphus falls far short. Regulus had long realized that her fervor was nothing like Bellatrix's. Bellatrix's eyes held only devotion to Voldemort himself. To her, he was almost divine, someone she would give everything for. Walburga's obsession, however, revolved entirely around the Black family's pure-blood legacy. Voldemort's rise merely happened to offer a means for the Blacks to reclaim their former height. Regulus listened quietly, a hint of reflection stirring in his chest. He remembered his magic awakening at 10 months old, and the ecstasy on Walburga's face as she held him. He remembered her sitting before the family tapestry, recounting the ancestors' achievements with near reverence. He remembered how, for all her rigidity, she would still tuck the blankets around him on cold nights. If there were another path that could preserve or even elevate the Black family's legacy without relying on Voldemort, Walburga might not be an obstacle at all. The condition was simple. He would have to achieve it and let her see it with her own eyes. "What do you think of your classmates?" Walburga asked suddenly. There was anticipation in her gaze, as though she already knew the answer. Regulus set down his cutlery, allowing a faint note of pride into his voice. "They're average." Orion glanced up at him. "Their talent varies widely, and most of them lack vision," Regulus continued. "They focus on coursework and house rivalries, unable to see beyond that." His attention had never lingered on his peers. In this era, none of them surpassed him. Walburga nodded vigorously. "Exactly. The half-bloods and Muggleborns aren't worth mentioning, and even some pure-bloods live off old glory. None of them compare to you. Our Regulus is the finest heir the Black family has." Orion set his wineglass down and spoke slowly. "At school, don't be overly showy." His tone was calm, not reproachful, more reminder than reprimand. "Still, your performance hasn't disappointed us." He looked toward the window, his voice lowering. "As for Sirius, keep an eye on him. If there's a chance, let him know the family still remembers him." Walburga frowned, clearly wanting to object, but she said nothing. She simply cut into her turkey with extra force, venting her displeasure in silence. Dinner ended amid Walburga's steady chatter and Orion's occasional remarks. As Cracker cleared the table, Orion said to Regulus, "Go get some rest, then come to my study." Regulus nodded. He knew this was where the real family conversation would begin. Walburga was suited to discussing school achievements and surface-level matters. Deeper topics were not for her. In that regard, even Narcissa was a better conversational partner. At least she could offer useful information and level-headed advice. Half an hour later, Regulus knocked on the door to Orion's study. "Come in." The room smelled of ink and old books. Behind a massive mahogany desk, Orion sat with an open copy of the Wiesengamot Compendium of Magical Law in his hands. When Regulus entered, Orion closed the book and leaned forward slightly, studying him closely. "In just half a year, you've changed a great deal," Orion said, a trace of wonder in his voice. "You stand straighter. Your presence is steadier. You don't look like an 11-year-old anymore. You look like a wizard who can stand on his own." Regulus stopped before the desk and waited, silent. Orion tapped his fingers lightly against the wood. "I warned you early on to mind your limits at school and not display too much. I wrote to you later as well. Sometimes holding back matters more than showing off." Confusion showed in his eyes. "I believed you were mature enough for us to speak as equals, yet your actions at school suggest you didn't take that advice." Regulus paused, thoughts moving quickly. He understood Orion's point and had never forgotten it. He truly had held back. What he showed was limited to magic control and spell proficiency, abilities a dedicated wizard might reach through training. Precise transfiguration. Silent wandless casting. Strong defensive magic. Impressive, yes, but still within the bounds of what a wizard should possess. He had never revealed the true depth of star-guided meditation. He had never exposed his research into microtransfiguration. He had never shown the knowledge carried by a soul from another world. And even so, that restrained display still exceeded everyone's expectations. I've already held back. Regulus raised his head and met Orion's gaze. His voice was calm, yet firm. What I showed is what I consider a normal level. Orion lifted a brow, clearly unconvinced. In the wizarding world, once personal power reaches a certain point, it can change many things, Regulus continued. A family's position, others' attitudes, and the resources available all depend directly on strength. I need people to see my values so I can gain more support. That benefits the Black family and myself. He added, and what I've shown is only a small part. My real strength has never been revealed. Surprise flickered through Orion's eyes, followed by deep contemplation. Chapter 53, A Duel with Orion. Orion thought back to all of Regulus's oddities as a child. Magic awakening at 10 months. Speaking in full sentences at 1 year old. A grasp of magic that far surpassed his peers. Reason told him that his son might be telling the truth. So what can you actually do now? Orion asked. Regulus did not answer directly. If you want to know, father, why not see for yourself? A strange light flickered in Orion's eyes as he stood. Come with me. At the far end of the study hung a seemingly ordinary Black family portrait. Orion stepped up and tapped the Sirius emblem at the lower right with his wand. The portrait slid aside, revealing a hidden stone door etched with complex magical runes. Orion spoke a spell. The runes glowed red, and the door slowly opened. Beyond it lay the Black family training chamber. The space was vast, the floor paved with solid black stone. Protective runes were embedded in the surrounding walls. Targets and training implements were stacked neatly in the corners. Regulus had been here a few times as a child. Back then, Orion had not allowed him to train seriously. Don't hold back, Orion said as he walked to the center of the room and drew his wand. His dark green robe spread behind him. Treat this like a real wizard's duel. Regulus drew his own wand. His fingers closed around the familiar grain of the wood as the 4-star began to turn quietly in his mind. Magic flowed smoothly along the star paths, spreading through his limbs and body. Begin. Orion's wand was already up as the word left his mouth. A silent disarming charm shot toward Regulus's chest, fast as lightning. Regulus shifted his footing and slipped aside. At the same time, his wand tapped the floor. An invisible protego formed instantly before him, blocking the obstacle spell that followed close behind. He moved quickly, weaving through the chamber as he evaded Orion's attacks. Orion's offense was relentless and precise. Disarming charms, locomotor mortis, petrificus totalis. One spell after another, no pause between them. The magic carried weight and density, the result of years of accumulation. As the 13th head of House of the Black family and a member of the Wizengamot, his strength far exceeded that of an ordinary adult wizard. Anyone who could hold a seat in the Wizengamot and keep the Black family steady on the eve of chaos was never ordinary. Regulus's defense was just as airtight. He did not raise a large protego. Instead, he generated miniature shields exactly where needed, intercepting spells based on their direction and speed. Sometimes he rolled aside. Sometimes he took lightning-fast steps that looked almost like short-range teleportation. His agility and reaction speed came from long-term magic circulation and physical refinement. Every movement was clean and efficient, without waste. Not bad, but not enough, Orion said as the power of his spells rose sharply. He swung his wand. The stone wall on one side of the chamber cracked apart. Several massive chunks of rock tore free and hurtled toward Regulus. Regulus's gaze sharpened. He did not try to take the hit head-on. His wand moved in a rapid arc. Several blasting curses fired at once, shattering the boulders into fragments. At the same time, water surged into the air, sweeping up the dust and debris. It condensed into countless sharp projectiles that shot toward Orion at high speed. Approval flashed in Orion's eyes. He flicked his wand again. The projectiles were intercepted midair and ignited with black flames, burning away in an instant. He continued, abandoning conventional spells. The air in the chamber thickened suddenly. Regulus felt crushing pressure slam into him, as if invisible walls were closing in. It was a dark magic compression curse that acted directly on the body. The more one struggled, the stronger the pressure became. Without escape or resistance, a person would be crushed. Regulus took a deep breath. His magic surged outward as constant protego burst from his body, isolating the crushing force. He went on the offensive. His wand flicked. Several silent disarming charms shot toward Orion from different angles. At the same time, jagged stone spikes burst from the floor, blocking Orion's movement. Their tips glowed faint red, explosive curses bound to them. Orion had not expected such a sudden counterattack, nor one so devious. He moved fast. A wide protego expanded to block the disarming charms as he leapt clear of the spikes. As he landed, black-red light gathered at the tip of his wand. A clear dark magic curse fired, silent and terrifyingly fast. Regulus had already predicted it. He threw himself backward. The curse grazed his shoulder and slammed into the wall behind him, leaving a scorched mark. He rolled with the motion, his wand snapping toward Orion's feet. Blue-white flames spread instantly, forcing Orion to retreat. The chamber grew more violent by the second. Stone walls shattered under spell fire. Debris flew. The floor was ravaged again and again by ice, fire, and stone spikes, leaving it uneven and broken. Residual magic filled the air. The temperature swung wildly as the protective runes flared repeatedly, neutralizing the overflow of destruction. The longer it went on, the more unsettled Orion became. Regulus's magic reserves were smaller than his, but his control was extraordinary. His spell transitions, timing, and tactical sense were far too mature for a child. Most striking was his defense. It looked passive, yet it always intercepted attacks at the critical moment. He even used the environment to strike back. Many adult wizards lacked that level of combat awareness. Orion stopped holding back. His wand moved faster and faster as dark magic and standard spells alternated. A dense web of attacks closed in on Regulus. Regulus's breathing stayed steady. His eyes were clear. His mind ran at full speed, calculating trajectories and power levels. Countless micro-protego shields formed instantly around him, intercepting every spell with precision. His body moved like a swift in flight, slipping through the attack net and striking back when openings appeared. He could clearly sense the flow of Orion's magic and predict the direction of the next spell. Each counterattack targeted a flaw. Bang! A powerful obstacle spell slammed into Regulus's shoulder. He staggered several steps but did not fall. That hit would have made an ordinary person cough blood. Someone weaker might have lost their grip on their wand and their ability to fight. Regulus barely slowed. Using the momentum of his retreat, he released a perfectly concealed silent curse that struck Orion's wand. The wand shuddered slightly. Orion's rhythm broke. Regulus seized the opening. His magic surged as several spells fired at once, all aimed at vital points. Orion's eyes hardened. He retreated quickly and raised a solid protego, blocking everything. Then he noticed something too late. Stone vines had risen from the floor and wrapped around his ankles. A transfiguration he had not detected at all. Orion paused, then laughed softly. His wand tapped once. The vines collapsed into dust and fell away. That brief pause was enough. Regulus was already close, his wand aimed straight at Orion's chest. In that instant, a blinding white light erupted. A flash spell filled the entire chamber. Regulus shut his eyes on instinct. When he opened them again, Orion was behind him, wand pressed lightly to the back of his neck. "You lose," Orion said calmly. His breathing was even. Dealing with Regulus at this level was still manageable. Regulus stopped and lowered his wand. There was no frustration on his face, only a faint smile. "I see the gap now." Orion withdrew his wand, his voice heavy with emotion. "You surprised me. At 11 years old, reaching this level, many adult wizards would struggle against you." He looked around at the ruined chamber. "Your control, your combat instincts, your understanding of magic, all of it is astonishing. It's far beyond what your age should allow." "This is only 6 months of progress," Regulus said as he turned away and holstered his wand. His breathing was quick. "I haven't hit a bottleneck yet. I'll only keep getting stronger." Orion took a deep breath, then nodded. He slapped Regulus's shoulder firmly, asking no further questions about how he had achieved this. "I have to admit it. Your performance at Hogwarts really was restrained." After a pause, he added, "Very restrained." Regulus smiled, openly and sincerely. Chapter 54, A Full Exchange of Views. The residual magic in the training chamber had yet to dissipate. The protective runes etched into the stone walls still glimmered with a faint red light, and the floor was pitted and uneven, rubble scattered everywhere. Regulus and Orion sat side by side on the ground, their backs against the cold black stone wall. The air still carried the heat and dampness left behind by colliding spells. Regulus was regulating his breathing, restoring his magic. After a short while, he spoke first. Sirius not coming home might not be a bad thing. Orion's movement paused. His gaze darkened, but he did not respond, waiting for Regulus to continue. He's comfortable at Hogwarts. James Potter and the others treat him sincerely, and the Gryffindor atmosphere suits him. Regulus's tone was calm, as if he were talking about someone unrelated to himself. His temperament is too intense. The Black family's rules, the twists and turns of the pure blood circle, he'll never accept any of that. He turned to look at Orion. The choice he's making now may seem rebellious, but it's actually the path that suits him best. Leaving Grimald Place and staying away from pure blood conflicts is the only way he can live freely. Orion remained silent, but fragments of memory suddenly surfaced in his mind. When Regulus was young, whenever Sirius had been scolded by Walburga, whenever Sirius complained about the family's restraints, Regulus would casually talk about choices, about paths, about leaving. Details Orion had once ignored now linked together, sending a jolt through his chest. Could it be that this younger son had already been subtly guiding Sirius toward this road long ago? He'll stand with Dumbledore in the future, Regulus said with certainty, as if he were already looking at what lay ahead. That's the best arrangement. Orion lifted his eyes, confusion flickering there, along with careful scrutiny. Why are you so sure? The situation makes it obvious. Regulus traced lightly over the floor with his finger, sketching a simple outline of the factions involved. Voldemort's rise is, at its core, an assault by pure blood supremacy on the existing order. What Dumbledore represents is the force that maintains a diverse balance. Sirius despises the hypocrisy and cruelty of the pure blood circle, so naturally he'll stand with Dumbledore. Regulus's voice rose slightly. And more than that, he's only suited to living in the light. On Dumbledore's side, there's a righteous and open stance, friends who fight alongside him, and a sense of justice he believes in. Those are exactly the things he wants. Letting him do what he truly believes in is far better than trapping him in the family and turning him into a resentful rebel. Orion looked at his son's clear line of thought and listened to his orderly analysis, and waves stirred in his heart. The balance of the wizarding world has already been broken, Regulus continued, his fingertip never stopping. Pure blood families control resources and heritage, yet cling stubbornly to tradition. In truth, it's just an unwillingness to give up benefits. Mixed blood and muggle-born wizards are rising, but they lack enough influence for now. That will change. They'll only grow stronger, until they can no longer be suppressed. The Ministry of Magic appears to control everything, but in reality it's weak. Voldemort's appearance only dragged these contradictions fully into the open. The future won't be a simple black and white divide. It'll be about competing interests. If Sirius stands with Dumbledore, he leaves the Black family a way out. We maneuver on this side and protect the family's foundation. Two paths that complement each other. No matter which side gains the upper hand in the end, the Black family survives. Orion was silent for a long time. The only sounds left in the chamber were the steady breaths of the two of them. He had to admit that, when it came to predicting the future, he was not as sharp as his 11-year-old son. Regulus already possessed formidable strength, but more importantly, he had a clear mind and long-term vision. That mattered far more than raw magic when it came to ensuring the Black family's continued legacy. After thinking for a long while, Orion finally nodded, his tone carrying a trace of release. From now on, I won't interfere with his choices. He looked at Regulus, his gaze turning solemn, as if making a formal handover. Anything concerning him will be left to you. Regulus did not respond. He simply looked quietly at his father. Orion took a deep breath, as though he had made a difficult decision, his voice low. Regulus, if it truly comes to it, you take priority. Regulus understood what that meant. Between the family's survival and Sirius's safety, his father had ultimately chosen the former. He had chosen the younger son who could better shoulder the Black family's future. Something stirred in Regulus's chest. He did not say anything eloquent. He simply reached out and patted Orion's shoulder firmly, the strength in his palm steady and resolute. Orion looked at his son's calm profile. The tension at the corners of his mouth eased into a faint smile, the heaviness in his eyes fading, replaced by relief and trust. The conversation naturally shifted to the upcoming Malfoy family Christmas banquet. At Malfoy gatherings, all the major families will be there, Orion said. Then he asked directly, I want to hear your thoughts. If Voldemort wants loyalty, we give him loyalty. If he wants resources, we provide resources. Regulus had already organized his thoughts. But we can't go all in like the Lestrange family, binding the family's fate completely to him. He refined the ideas he had once discussed with Narcissa. We show loyalty on the surface, while maintaining independence in secret. He needs the Black family's strength and prestige, and we use that as leverage. Within his sphere of influence, we preserve our own decision-making space and room to grow. We don't provoke trouble, and we don't obey blindly. At critical moments, we need our own judgment. We can't let ourselves be completely assimilated. Orion listened and nodded slightly, tapping his fingers against his knee. What you're thinking aligns closely with the family's current plans. His tone carried a shrewd edge. Voldemort is indeed powerful, and his charisma is exceptional, even by wizarding history. But he hasn't reached the point where every family should stake everything on him. He turned to Regulus and decided to share more internal details. Some families are truly fanatical and follow him without reservation, but more are simply watching. There are even a few families who deliberately push those foolish enough to the front, letting them pledge themselves completely. In reality, they're observing. They want to see what kind of ending awaits those who attach themselves entirely to Voldemort. Regulus's heart stirred, and he understood immediately. He had always thought that, with the Transmigrator's foresight, he saw the situation clearly, as if he had a god's eye view. He had forgotten that Orion had led the Black family for many years and survived countless political struggles. When it came to these intricate maneuvers, Orion had far more experience. The Black family's thousand-year legacy had never relied on brute force alone, but on this kind of cautious, calculated advance. He had indeed been somewhat arrogant before, underestimating the survival wisdom of these ancient families. But then another thought followed. Even if Orion saw through it all, in the predetermined fate, the Black family still met a tragic end. Walburga's fanaticism, Sirius's break from the family, Bella's madness, and Voldemort's suspicion and cruelty. None of those could be resolved by cleverness alone. In the end, only sufficiently overwhelming power could allow one to control their own fate amid the storm. Orion did not notice his son's thoughts and continued, "You want to place the Black family in the position of a collaborator. It's a bold idea, and a risky one. Voldemort's desire for control is extreme. If he senses it, it would be seen as provocation, and the consequences would be dangerous." Then his tone shifted. "But it's not impossible. As long as we display enough value to make him feel the Black family is indispensable, while staying low and not stealing the spotlight or crossing his bottom line, we can quietly develop our own power right under his nose." He looked at Regulus. "At the banquet, you'll stay by my side. Leave everything to me. We'll put on the proper front, say what needs to be said, and avoid asking what shouldn't be asked. Your strength is already enough to earn their respect. There's no need to deliberately show it off." Regulus nodded, then brought up the matter that had been on his mind. "Father, I want to see the inheritance stored in the family vault." Orion's expression darkened immediately, and he refused without hesitation. "No." "Why?" Regulus pressed. "The family inheritance is not ordinary spellbooks," Orion said gravely. "Our ancestors sealed the powerful magic they mastered in their lifetimes, their insights into magic, and their combat experience into memory crystals. Those memories don't just contain complete methods. They also carry the ancestors' magic and spiritual will." He emphasized his words. "That magic is immense, and the spiritual will is extraordinarily strong. To make contact rashly, at best, means being suppressed by an ancestor's will and having your own magical path affected. At worst, it leads to mental collapse and backlash, turning you into nothing more than a vessel for the inheritance, stripped of yourself." Chapter 55, Imperio and Ancestral Magic Bonus. Regulus already understood. He leaned forward and pressed, "What exactly is in the inheritance?" "There's Cassandra's Shadow Step charm. It lets you merge into shadows and achieve true invisibility and instant movement. It's far more advanced than a disillusionment charm. There's Eldrin's Verdant Magic. It guides natural magic into your body. From the faint life in flowers and grass to the weighty energy of forests, mountains, and rivers, you can turn it all to your own use. There's Aurelius's Sky Volcano Curse. It doesn't need real terrain. You condense a molten core in a chosen patch of sky. When it detonates, it forms a floating volcano. The lava and flame streams can lock onto a target with precision. And there's Valerius's bone and blood binding curse. You use your own blood as a conduit and forcibly bind yourself to an enemy, establishing a bloodline connection. Through that link, you can strike directly or even predict an attack's trajectory. Also Sevilla's soul-mending charm, which repairs damage to the soul. And the space anchor charm. It lays invisible anchor points in empty space, stabilizing the structure of the area and resisting apparition ambushes and spatial distortion magic. Orion listed them with a reverence that made his voice heavier. These spells are all terrifyingly powerful, and they're just as dangerous. Verdant magic most of all. If you slip up even a little, the raw, violent surge of natural magic will crush you. Eldrin died that way. He drew too much, siphoned too hard, and it killed him. Sky volcano curse is brutally demanding on the mind. Lose focus for a moment and it runs wild, and you'll be the first one it burns. Every inheritance memory, every impact of the transfer, is enough to make a grown wizard back away. Something stirred in Regulus at the mention of verdant magic. It lined up too neatly with the experiment he'd done before, coaxing power through a daisy. Maybe this was the path. Maybe this was how you pulled out the lethal magic hidden inside a mandrake. I can handle it. He meant every word. Regulus's voice came out steady. What I showed you earlier wasn't everything. My mind's tougher than most, and my soul is stable enough to withstand the ancestors' memories. Orion's brow drew tight, disbelief written plainly across his face. You're strong, you see further than most, and you're clever. I won't argue any of that. But mental strength and the strength of a soul aren't measured by those things. An ancestor's will has been tempered and fed by centuries. It's stronger than you think. Even I wouldn't claim I could completely resist it. He truly couldn't accept it. An 11-year-old child having power and intelligence was already rare enough. Having a spirit and soul sturdy enough for something like this felt like it went against the rules of the world. Regulus knew words wouldn't convince him. He met his father's eyes and said, "Then let's test it with Imperio." Regulus had thought it through. In the story, Harry Potter could resist Imperio in 4th year, cast by Barty Crouch Jr. Regulus wasn't about to believe he fell short. Orion froze for a beat, then understood exactly what Regulus was asking. Imperio struck directly at the mind and will. If you could resist it, that was the cleanest proof there was. Orion wanted to refuse. Imperio was unforgivable for a reason. But Regulus's expression didn't waver, and Orion couldn't ignore everything he'd already seen from his son. In the end, he nodded. Fine. Orion stood, wand raised, his tone turning sharp and controlled. I'll manage the strength. We'll start light and increase it. If anything feels wrong, you tell me immediately. Regulus rose as well and took a few steps back, leaving space between them. Imperio. The spell shot out. A dead grey force surged toward Regulus's awareness. Instantly, he felt it, a foreign power trying to push into his mind. It was like someone whispering right beside his ear, over and over, cold and absolute, nudging him into simple actions. Lift your hand. Turn around. Put down your wand. That will wanted his body. It wanted to twist his judgment until obeying felt like the most natural thing in the world. But Regulus's mental barrier held. The invading force slammed into it like surf striking stone and scattered at once, collapsing before it could even reach his thoughts. Orion saw Regulus's eyes go empty, his focus slipping away, and assumed it had taken hold. Softly, he ordered, "Raise your hand." Regulus didn't move. He stayed exactly as he was, posture straight, not a single twitch of control. Orion's frown deepened. He pushed more power into the curse. More magic poured in. The whispers thickened, multiplying until they seemed to crowd the air itself. The pressure grew heavier, trying to pry at the edges of Regulus's barrier. It even began to interfere with the flow of his magic, searching for a crack. Regulus still didn't flinch. He even spoke, calm as anything. "Hold it a little longer. I want to feel it more." Orion stared at him, and his grip on the wand slackened without him meaning to. Disbelief flooded his face. What kind of person asked to experience Imperio longer? This was one of the 3 unforgivables. A torture aimed straight at the mind and will. Most wizards either fought with everything they had or were controlled in an instant. Nobody, absolutely nobody, resisted it completely and then requested extra time like it was a lesson they didn't want to end. Worse, Regulus wasn't struggling. There was no chaotic magic, no tremor in his casting core. Even his breathing stayed even. It didn't look like an unforgivable was being forced into him. It looked like someone had tossed a cheering charm his way. Imperio's whole nature was the violent rewriting of will. Even if you resisted, you were supposed to feel the tearing, the strain, the pressure of something trying to peel you open. Regulus sounded like he was talking about the weather. That kind of composure wasn't something you expected from an 11-year-old. It was something even a seasoned auror might not manage. Orion could have gone further. He could have made the curse more corrosive, sharper, more invasive. He could have torn through Regulus's barrier entirely and left damage behind that might never heal. But this was his son. And Regulus had already proven enough. This kind of mental strength was more than sufficient to touch the family inheritance. Orion lowered his wand. Regulus's gaze cleared at once. There was no trace of control, no lingering haze. Even his magic flowed as smoothly as ever, as if the spell had never landed. Your mental strength. Orion's voice carried a tremor of excitement. It really is enough to withstand the ancestors' memories. He put his wand away and studied Regulus's eyes, long and serious. After a long moment, he said, "Come with me." When he turned, Orion couldn't stop the corner of his mouth from lifting. His pace even quickened. After a while, he spoke again, trying to sound casual and failing. A thread of hope crept into his words. "Sirius, is he like you?" Regulus followed behind him, and for a second he couldn't quite hide how done he felt. "Mr. Black, what exactly are you hoping for here?" He hesitated, then answered carefully, "He's healthy." Orion gave a quiet cough and said nothing more. He kept walking toward the stone door at the deepest end of the training hall, Regulus right behind him. They passed through several hidden corridors before arriving at the family's sealed chamber. The door was carved from a single slab of obsidian. Ancient runes covered its surface, and the air around it felt thick with old magic. Orion murmured an archaic incantation. One rune after another lit up red, and the stone door slowly swung inward. A breath of air rolled out, heavy with the weight of time. Inside, the chamber was spacious and solemn. Magic torches were set into the walls, casting a steady light over a stone platform at the center. On the platform sat more than a dozen crystal spheres, each about the size of a fist. Soft silver light swirled within them, and every so often, a flicker of an image flashed deep inside. "This is the family inheritance," Orion said as he approached the platform, awe plain in his eyes. He turned to Regulus, his voice firm and careful. "Remember this. The moment you touch a crystal, the ancestors' memories will trigger directly. You can't resist them. You need to accept them, understand them, and make them yours. If you feel your mind can't take it, break the connection immediately. Don't try to prove anything." Regulus stepped up to the platform. His gaze settled on the leftmost sphere. Eldrin's verdant magic. He lifted his hand and let his fingertips meet the crystal. It was icy cold. Then, in the next heartbeat, power and memory crashed into his awareness like a tidal wave. He saw Eldrin sitting still in the mountains and forests. He saw the way he reached outward, how he connected to everything living, how the world answered him in return. The impact wrapped around Regulus's mind all at once. He clenched his jaw and threw his mental barrier wide, not to block it, but to hold steady while he accepted the inheritance. Orion stood beside him, eyes locked on Regulus's face, ready to cut the connection the moment anything went wrong. Regulus's body trembled. Cold sweat beaded at his hairline, but he didn't break. He didn't collapse. Orion's shock deepened again. Regulus sank into the memories. Every insight Eldrin had ever had about natural magic laid itself out inside Regulus's mind with painful clarity. But Eldrin's verdant magic had come from something innate, a gift unique to him, like Parseltongue. And Regulus clearly didn't have that gift. He didn't know how much time passed before he finally pulled his hand back, fingertips leaving the crystal. Orion leaned in at once. "Well? How is it?" Regulus's mouth tugged downward, just slightly. "It's fine."
Additionally, if you would like to request novels and access my Google Drive where I have 200+ audiobooks, then you can join my Patreon. Link is also provided in the description.